The group stands together, a silhouette of the legendary party that was supposed to save the world from the encroaching darkness. They come to a sudden stop in the middle of a forest path. Nicola, trailing slightly behind, looks up in confusion as the command to halt echoes through the trees. He reflects on how this journey began 2 years prior. Back then, he had been scouted to join the hero's elite squad tasked with slaying the Demon Lord. Despite his initial refusal, driven by a deep-seated disdain for labor, their relentless persistence eventually wore him down. He finally relented, rationalizing the quest as nothing more than an extended session of martial arts training. After joining their ranks, he committed himself fully to the path ahead. Together, they traversed treacherous lands, battling monstrous chimeras and surviving grueling trials that forged them into a cohesive unit. With the Demon Lord's dark citadel finally looming on the horizon, the end of their long journey seemed within reach. They were stunned when, at this critical juncture, the hero abruptly turned and delivered a crushing blow to their unity, declaring that Nicola was officially exiled from the party. They watched in silence as the weight of his words left the others reeling, with one companion attempting to protest the injustice before being sharply silenced by another member who insisted the leader's word was final. He stood frozen, his mind racing as he struggled to comprehend the sudden turn of events. When he dared to ask why their bond as a team meant so little, the hero sneered, dismissing him as a mere pawn and a coward whose presence only served to tarnish the group's pristine reputation. Before he could even process the insult, a staff began to glow with an ominous light. One of the mages stepped forward, her tone cold and dismissive as she warned him against questioning their authority, effectively severing his last tie to the group. She begins by acknowledging the truth, admitting that his guidance was instrumental in refining her own combat techniques. In response, he gestures emphatically, insisting that his contributions make him an indispensable member of the group, claiming he has only grown more capable through their shared trials. However, she remains bitter, questioning if he truly understands the weight of being branded a coward by strangers, a reputation she now shares simply by being known as a student. She snaps at him for his perceived lack of seriousness, but he counters with a quiet gravity, explaining that he knows all too well the sting of being judged by those he considered brothers in arms. Seeking a final confirmation, he asks if the group can truly function in his absence, to which the golden-haired leader scoffs, declaring his own presence as the hero more than sufficient. The two women immediately rally behind their leader, their voices joining in a chorus of unwavering agreement that leaves no room for doubt. A heavy silence falls over him as the realization sinks in. He is no longer a comrade, but merely an obstacle to their progress. The leader offers a final, condescending assurance of their safety, prompting him to turn away and begin the long trek back, offering a hollow wish of luck for their confrontation with the Demon Lord. As he retreats, the leader's parting words are a sharp dismissal, labeling him a nuisance and demanding he vanish from their sight forever. But the peace of his departure is shattered by a sudden, violent strike from the shadows, accompanied by a mocking warning that he should never have let his guard down. He is caught completely off guard as a sudden, violent strike tears through the air, sending a spray of crimson across his vision. Behind the assault stand his former companions. Allura and Satella watch with cold, unwavering intensity, their weapons drawn and ready to ensure his downfall. Standing over his broken form, the hero looks down with a sneer, callously declaring that the party will find a much better use for the high-grade equipment he no longer deserves. With a final, mocking farewell to the man he now labels Mr. Jobless, the leader turns his back, leading the others away as they leave their former comrade bleeding in the dirt. As they disappear into the distance, he gasps for breath while blood pools in his mouth, the bitter irony of their betrayal sparking a final, silent question about who among them is the true coward. He is left alone in the silence of the clearing, his body still and broken against the cold earth as the light fades from the sky. The seasons turn and the world moves on, leaving the memory of that betrayal behind as 2 full years pass in the wake of his abandonment. Now bearing the marks of time and a rugged beard, the man remains steadfast in his resolve, flatly refusing the conventional path of labor and declaring that he will never seek a formal job. As he embraces this new life of isolation, she sits in quiet reflection, her expression unreadable as she lingers in a room that feels heavy with the weight of the past. While she remains lost in thought, he throws himself into the grueling life of a martial artist, a path that demands total devotion. He believes that the distractions of a career and the safety of social ties only serve to weaken a warrior's resolve and make them hesitate when life is on the line. He maintains a stoic gaze, explaining that for a martial artist, the very act of holding a job is a path to defeat, as it softens the edge required for survival. His sister listens, a bead of sweat rolling down her cheek as she admits to understanding the logic behind his stubborn refusal to participate in society. Despite her understanding, she bluntly accuses him of simply wanting to live as a freeloader, a charge he accepts with a shameless, casual nod of agreement. He counters by pointing out that she handles the household expenses, and should he ever require extra coin, he can simply hunt down a few bandits. She fires back that while money isn't the issue, his status as her brother is the only thing keeping him from being thrown onto the street. She shifts the focus, questioning the purpose of the significant wealth he has already managed to accumulate through his unconventional methods, wondering why he hoards it. The young man remains tight-lipped, claiming the reason is a secret, which only fuels her suspicion that his motives are far from noble. As she lets out a weary sigh, she warns him that such constant negativity will bar him from ever finding true happiness, prompting an immediate and sharp retort about who is truly responsible for his current state of mind. She laments the fact that he is the heir to a count's title, yet he remains unmoved, arguing that her own wealth is more than sufficient to support them both and questioning her sudden, persistent insistence on his employment. This title, however, is a hollow one. It was granted to their uncle for his service but lacked any accompanying land, prestige, or true honor, leaving them with a name that carries weight only in theory. She turns her gaze toward the bookshelves, her expression unreadable as she prepares to move the conversation forward. She leans back on the plush sofa, her arms crossed with a firm resolve that leaves no room for argument. With a steady gaze, she declares her intention to finally put an end to his idle lifestyle, insisting that she is going to make him work. She faces his immediate skepticism regarding the feasibility of such a plan, even as she insists on personally recommending him for the position. He merely scoffs at the idea, certain that no reputable establishment would ever hire someone he considers jobless trash, like himself. He receives a knowing smile in response as she assures him that the specific location she has in mind is a perfect fit for his unique circumstances. When he sarcastically asks if this magical workplace offers high pay and ample vacations, she bluntly informs him that such a paradise exists only in his dreams. She watches as he grows uncharacteristically serious, a bead of sweat tracing his brow while he reiterates his refusal to work. He challenges her, asking if she truly understands the underlying reasons and the personal philosophy that have led him to embrace this life of avoidance. He is momentarily caught off guard when she lightens the mood by claiming she was only joking, though the levity is short-lived. She pivots back to the core of the issue, asking him directly if his true goal is simply to sponge off the efforts of others and coast through an easy existence. She softens her expression with a touch of earnestness, explaining that the world is not as hostile as he perceives it to be. She urges him to move past his old traumas and finally take the necessary steps to reintegrate into the society he has long shunned. She points toward the grand, spired silhouette of a distant academy, revealing that she manages a school currently in need of new teaching staff. Her plan is for him to step into the role of an instructor within those very walls, a prospect that catches him completely off guard. She is met with a look of pure disbelief as he struggles to comprehend what he could possibly teach, given his lack of formal qualifications. He questions whether he is meant to be a subject of study himself, or if there is some specific part of the curriculum he is actually suited for. He listens as she narrows her eyes, shifting the conversation toward a broader social crisis, the rapidly declining birth rates that have become a major concern for their world. This shift in topic adds a layer of unexpected gravity to her proposal. She explains the school's purpose in direct response to public demand for institutions that teach young men and women how to enhance their personal appeal. The ultimate goal of his potential new workplace is to foster connections and increase the number of marriages to combat the societal decline. She leans in, her gaze intense as she utters a single, defining word: strength. Because of the changing times, the old metrics of attraction, wealth, beauty, and intellect have become obsolete. In this modern era, if one lacks power, everything else is meaningless. She continues her explanation, noting that the academy was founded to meet the desperate global demand for individuals of true caliber. The societal shift has placed an overwhelming premium on physical and martial prowess, to the point where some critics claim a person's entire worth is measured by their muscle. Turning her attention back to him, she suggests that the act of instructing others will foster his own personal growth. While he might currently be seen as nothing more than an unemployed vagrant, she hasn't forgotten his history as a member of the Heroes Party. His combat proficiency is a rare and valuable asset she is willing to bet on. He admits his reservations, questioning whether someone as socially inept as himself can truly accommodate others. She simply smiles, offering a word of encouragement that he will find his footing soon enough. However, she adds a final condition. He must first pass a formal entrance exam to secure the position. The warrior sighs at the prospect of more hurdles, muttering that while it sounds like a tedious bother, such is the nature of life. She catches his dismissive tone and sharpens her warning, revealing that she will be the one supervising the test. If she even suspects he is failing on purpose to avoid the job, he will find himself out on the street. With a playful yet firm glint in her eye, she tells him to aim for the highest marks if he wishes to keep a roof over his head. Soon after, he finds himself walking through the bustling streets of Shanoa. This republic is a melting pot of cultures, a unique nation of immigrants where humans and demi-humans live side by side in a delicate, vibrant coexistence. He wanders through the bustling streets of Shanoa, marveling at the seamless integration of elves, goblins, and giants living alongside humans. The sheer diversity of the republic is a constant source of wonder, but a sudden rustling sound nearby breaks his train of thought. Panic sets in as he reaches for his pockets, only to realize with a jolt that he has forgotten his wallet. He agonizes over his predicament, loath to the idea of having to borrow money from anyone. While he frets, a harsh, aggressive voice cuts through the ambient noise of the market, as a man bellows an insult at a young girl who has crossed his path. The girl, Allura, trembles as she tries to defend herself, her voice small and wavering. She insists that it was he who bumped into her, her wide eyes filled with a mixture of fear and confusion at the sudden hostility. Unmoved by her plea, the man continues his verbal assault, gesturing wildly at his clothing. He rants about how his favorite shirt is now ruined with wrinkles all because of her, punctuating his anger with cruel names and accusations that she was the one who started the altercation. Watching the scene unfold, his expression hardens, his dark eyes narrowing with a newfound sense of purpose. He realizes that this is the moment he has been waiting for, an opportunity to act and prove his worth in this new land. Without a second thought, he lunges forward and firmly grips Allura's arm, startling both her and her harasser. He ignores the man's sneering assumption that he must have enough cash to pay for a replacement shirt and simply commands her to run, pulling her away from the brewing conflict before it can escalate further. She can barely process what is happening, her pupils dilating in sheer shock as she is suddenly whisked away. The world becomes a blur as she is forced into a sudden, desperate flight by this stranger. Behind them, the man's enraged voice echoes through the crowded thoroughfare, demanding to know where they think they are going. His shouts are quickly swallowed by the distance as the pair weaves through the throngs of people. Their boots pound against the cobblestones in a rhythmic, frantic beat. Every step takes them further from the confrontation, the sounds of the market fading into the background as they prioritize escape over explanation. Finally, they duck into the shadows of a secluded alleyway, the stone walls providing a much-needed barrier from the chaos. He pauses to catch his breath, assuring her that they should be safe there, while she leans against the cold brick, still reeling from the sudden turn of events. He stares back with a cold, unwavering gaze as their pursuer sneers, mocking their predicament. The bald man, his pointed ears twitching with malice, declares that he has finally cornered them like trapped rats in the narrow alleyway. The warrior remains silent, positioning himself firmly between the girl and the approaching threat. The thug steps forward with a predatory confidence, a sinister grin spreading across his face as he anticipates an easy victory. He doesn't wait for the man to strike first. With explosive speed, he lunges forward, burying a powerful fist deep into the thug's midsection. The force of the blow is immense, the impact echoing through the stone walls as the aggressor is nearly lifted off his feet. The sudden counterattack leaves the man gasping for air, his face contorted in a mask of pure agony. Behind him, Allura watches in stunned silence, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief at the sheer power of her protector. She finds her voice as the immediate danger fades, her words trembling as she asks for the identity of the man who just saved her. He stands with his back to her, the tension slowly bleeding from his shoulders as he prepares to answer. He turns slightly, a faint, contemplative smile touching his lips. Though he admits to being a man currently adrift and without a clear path in life, he declares with newfound conviction that everything is about to change. He has decided to become a teacher. Standing in the quiet of the alleyway, the man who had just intervened shared his ambition, stating firmly that he intended to become a teacher. He was met with wide-eyed surprise from the young woman, who questioned his choice of profession. She then shared a startling coincidence. She had just been admitted to Manhwa Academy that very day. He could only respond with a look of mild disbelief. She continued, her expression softening as she explained her desire for personal growth and the effort it took to gain her parents' permission to attend. He observed her delicate frame, noting that she didn't exactly look like the warrior type, but he quickly shifted the conversation, realizing they had yet to exchange names. With a bright, determined smile, she formally introduced herself as Alice, a soon-to-be first-year student at the academy. She watched as he returned the gesture, identifying himself as Nicola. The young woman expressed her deep gratitude for his help during the earlier confrontation, but her thanks were cut short as she watched him crouch over the fallen thug to retrieve a discarded wallet. He was questioned by the girl regarding the morality of taking the man's gold, but Nicola dismissed her concerns, arguing that a man who makes a living through extortion has no right to complain. His eyes lit up as he discovered a significant haul of 13 gold coins inside. He urged her not to dwell on the ethics of the situation and prepared to part ways. Alice, however, seemed hesitant, as if there was more she wanted to discuss regarding the strange circumstances of their meeting. Their conversation was violently interrupted by a sharp cry of "Princess!" A young woman with light hair and a fierce expression charged into the alley, immediately branding Nicola a criminal for being alone with Alice in such a place. The newcomer's eyes burned with protective rage as she demanded he say his last prayers. Nicola held up a hand in a futile attempt to de-escalate, trying to explain that she had completely misread the situation. She lunges forward with a sudden, aggressive strike, but Nicola is already moving to intercept the blow before it can land. With a swift, practiced motion, he catches her wrist mid-swing and uses her own momentum against her in a fluid redirection. The force of the maneuver sends her crashing into the stone floor with a heavy thud, leaving her momentarily stunned and gasping for air. Alice immediately rushes to the fallen girl's side, calling out to Iris in concern and demanding to know why she would attack so recklessly. Still catching her breath, the girl explains that she had heard rumors of a man taking the princess away and rushed to her rescue without a second thought. She quickly clarifies the misunderstanding, assuring her friend that Nicola is actually a potential teacher who had come to her aid during a difficult moment earlier. Realizing her mistake, the girl offers a blunt apology, admitting she acted on the assumption of a threat to the princess's safety. Nicola, dusting himself off, remarks that punching first and asking questions later is hardly the way to make a good first impression. The tension remains as she retorts with a sharp jab at his appearance, claiming he has the face of a criminal and looks like a friendless loser to boot. Nicola internally bristles at the comment about his social life, but outwardly, he only offers a dry defense of his features, questioning if he truly looks like a kidnapper. Alice changes the subject to de-escalate the situation, mentioning the upcoming exhibition matches where instructors demonstrate their skills to the students, and expresses a sincere hope that he might become their homeroom teacher. As the group prepares to head toward the academy, Alice promises to explain the circumstances of their meeting to the faculty to ensure he doesn't face any trouble for the earlier confusion. With a casual wave, he takes his leave, citing a busy schedule. Alice watches him depart, noting to herself how busy he seems to be, her expression thoughtful as she considers their brief but eventful encounter. While she remains behind, the focus shifts to the grand spires of Shanoa Academy, which rise against the sky as a bastion of learning and martial prowess. Approaching the imposing gates, Nicola finally arrives, announcing his presence to the head instructor who awaits him. She greets him with a mix of professional detachment and newfound respect, admitting that while she was briefed on the circumstances and initially had a poor impression of him, his recent intervention to rescue a student from thugs has forced her to reconsider his character. He responds with a dry remark, sensing the insincerity in her praise, though she simply offers a smirk and commends him for a job well done. Without further delay, she directs him toward the arena, ignoring his question about whether he has already failed due to his lateness, and notes that the audience is already gathered and eager to see him perform. As he prepares for the test, the terms of the engagement are laid out. A demonstration match where victory is secured only when an opponent concedes or is rendered physically unable to continue. Because his bare fists have always been his primary tools, she reminds him that the academy places no restrictions on combat, allowing for any magic, weapon, or even foul play of his preference. While they discuss the upcoming bout, the broader context of combat in this world is explained, starting with the first style, which relies on the mechanical efficiency of firearms and heavy artillery. Beyond the reach of steel and lead lies the second category, the realm of magic, where practitioners bend the fundamental elements of fire and water to their will to devastate large areas. Finally, the third path is revealed as the use of ki, where warriors manifest their inner vital force to harden their bodies beyond the strength of steel, allowing them to survive lethal falls and split rocks with their bare hands. Nicola stood firm, his expression one of quiet confidence as he assured Iris that his years spent fighting bandits and training in the mountains had prepared him for this moment. She, however, remained cautious, urging him to think twice and reconsider the strength of an opponent who possessed such elevated ki levels. Stepping into the center of the roaring arena, he was met with a wave of cheers from the spectators. Voices from the crowd thanked him for his bravery in rescuing the princess, while his opponent noted with a smirk that he had certainly become a popular figure among the student body. The challenger didn't stop there, boasting that only a select few in the academy possessed his level of ki control. He looked at Nicola with disdain, questioning if the sheer display of his power had already left the newcomer speechless. He continued his taunts, admitting that while Nicola clearly had the skills to back up his confidence, he had simply been unlucky to face such a formidable opponent today. In his eyes, Nicola would have passed the test with flying colors against anyone else. With a sudden, violent surge of energy, the student began to manifest his ki, the air around him vibrating with the force of the release. He offered a mock apology, claiming he wanted to settle things now to avoid any potential problems in the future. Nicola merely smiled, offering his own apology in return for the upcoming humiliation. He explained that he found it quite intriguing how his opponent could be so boastful when his ki levels were, in reality, entirely run-of-the-mill. This blunt assessment drew a sharp, irritated reaction from the student, but the instructor only responded with a light-hearted laugh, seemingly imperturbable by the rising tension. His gaze sharpened as he looked directly at his adversary, a faint aura of his own power beginning to shimmer around his shoulders like wisps of white flame. High above the arena floor, Princess Alice took her place among the spectators, her presence drawing hushed whispers as the crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch for the start of the duel. As she approached the royal box, the academy instructor gestured toward a prepared seat, formally inviting the princess to witness the demonstration match. She observed the young princess, who spoke with a surprising level of conviction about her desire to be treated as a common student rather than a royal guest, insisting that no special favors be granted during her time at the academy. In response to the girl's resolve, the instructor offered a graceful apology for her intrusion, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders as she maintained a poised and respectful demeanor. She then shifted the conversation toward family matters, questioning Alice on how well she truly knew her own father, the king. As Alice admitted to being kept in the dark about royal affairs, the instructor explained the academy's strategic importance, revealing its close ties to the Elven Kingdom and the ambitious plans to establish a sister school within their territory. She further revealed that the king himself had personally entrusted her with the task of shaping Alice into a capable combatant, a duty she intended to see through to its conclusion regardless of Alice's own self-doubt. Seeing the princess hesitate, she offered words of encouragement, noting that graduating from this institution would finally earn her the king's genuine respect, and urging her to have faith in her own potential. This sparked a fire in Alice, who enthusiastically promised to grow stronger and earn that trust, much to the instructor's satisfaction as she noted the trouble Alice had faced on her journey to the academy. The instructor expressed a quiet relief that her brother's actions, however foolish they might have been, had ultimately been helpful to the princess, leaving Alice to ponder the true nature of the help she had received. Nearby, the other students watched the exchange with curiosity, and one finally gathered the courage to speak up, asking if she might pose a question of her own. Meanwhile, back in the sun-drenched arena, the crowd's cheers reached a fever pitch as Nicola stood his ground, though his silent intensity and lack of movement led some onlookers to wonder if he was hiding an injury. He stands amidst the arena's dust, his presence seemingly diminished. From the sidelines, Alice watches with growing alarm, sensing that his internal energy, his ki, has plummeted far below its usual intensity. Because of this sudden weakness, she begins to spiral into guilt, wondering if he sustained a hidden injury while rescuing her earlier. Iris, however, remains composed, assuring her companion that their brother is actually in peak condition despite appearances. Meanwhile, the instructor observes the unfolding tension, preparing to explain the situation in simpler terms to those watching. In the stands, the other students whisper amongst themselves, mocking the supposedly mediocre energy radiating from the center of the ring. She continues her explanation, noting that her brother doesn't view this as a mere exhibition. For him, the upcoming clash is a serious, no-holds-barred engagement where every ounce of skill matters. As the atmosphere thickens, a dark-haired student approaches the center of the arena with an air of unearned confidence. He speaks bluntly, suggesting that it would be better for everyone if the opponent simply surrendered now to avoid a public embarrassment. The challenger elaborates, claiming he has no desire to ruin his own reputation by crushing the man celebrated for saving the elven princess, even though he is certain of his own victory. He proposes a deal where they both walk away with their pride intact, sparing them the uncertainty of a real fight. Nicola listens in silence, his expression unreadable as the arrogant proposal hangs in the air. To drive his point home, the student points a mocking finger, claiming that his opponent's ki levels are merely those of a mid-tier adventurer. He scoffs at the disparity, likening the potential match to a grown man bullying a helpless child. The veteran warrior closes his eyes for a moment, perhaps weary of the posturing or simply choosing the path of least resistance. With a quiet sigh, he agrees to the terms, ending the confrontation before a single blow is struck. Satisfied with the outcome, the student commends the decision as they both turn to leave the sandy floor. Behind them, the audience erupts into confused chatter, left wondering why the anticipated duel ended in such an anticlimactic fashion. He is suddenly doubled over as a sharp, precise strike connects with his groin, the impact echoing through the arena and catching him completely off guard. The student lets out a guttural scream of agony, collapsing to his knees while Nicola looks down, deciding to offer a harsh lesson in the reality of combat. Standing calmly over his fallen opponent, Nicola explains that he intentionally lowered his ki output to lure the youth into a false sense of superiority. Waiting for the exact moment, he left himself completely exposed. He continues his lecture, revealing that while the challenger was distracted by his own arrogance, Nicola had concentrated all his hidden energy into his legs for that single, finishing blow. With a piercing gaze, he advises the defeated student to learn how real fights take place, where survival and efficiency matter more than posturing. The challenger remains curled on the ground in pain, unable to move as Nicola turns his back on the one-sided encounter, the match effectively over. As the official announcement rings out declaring him the victor, Nicola stands in the center of the ring, his expression unreadable despite the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Around him, the audience erupts not in cheers, but in a chorus of boos and accusations, with students shouting that the victory was nothing more than foul play and cowardice. They argue fiercely in the stands, claiming that such a man is unfit to be an instructor and will only serve as a corrupting influence on the rest of the academy. High above the disgruntled crowd, Iris admits the tactic was underhanded, yet she notes that no rules were broken and that the sheer speed and ki control Nicola displayed were, in truth, exceptional. She stood amidst a crowd that had fallen into a stunned, heavy silence. The students, who moments ago were shouting in protest, now watched with wide eyes, unable to process the sudden and pragmatic conclusion of the duel. Breaking the quiet, the head instructor stepped forward to address the assembly, her expression unreadable but firm. She officially announced that, despite the unconventional nature of the victory, she was welcoming Nicola as a formal member of the Academy's faculty. She continued her address, explaining that true combat is unpredictable and rarely begins with a formal signal. With a gesture toward the new instructor, she urged the students to set aside their pride and learn from his pragmatic approach to survival, emphasizing that real battles don't wait for them to be ready. Her words seemed to resonate with some, as a scattered, hesitant applause began to ripple through the ranks of the students. She reminded them that being prepared at every moment and honing their battle instincts was a fundamental tenet that would be crucial for their future studies and survival. As the applause grew, the man at the center of the controversy remained stoic, his dark eyes betraying no emotion. He accepted his new role with a quiet, weary intensity, already looking past the crowd toward the challenges that lay ahead in his new position. From within one of the stone corridors, Nicola gazes out at the sprawling grounds, his expression unreadable as he contemplates his new surroundings. The architecture of the various halls is uniform, yet a sense of isolation hangs over certain wings, almost as if the classrooms themselves were designed to keep people apart. This separation is no accident. The Academy operates on a strict policy where students are divided into classrooms based entirely on their race. In practice, this means that humans are grouped with their own kind, while orcs and other races are relegated to their own specific quarters for their studies. There are, however, two notable exceptions to this racial divide. the first being the prestigious first class, which gathers the most powerful students regardless of their origin. The second exception is the ninth class, a group composed of the weakest first-year students, whom the academy tolerates primarily for the significant financial contributions their families provide. He arrives at the door of this very classroom, noting that while these students may lack martial prowess, they are almost exclusively the children of wealthy aristocrats and influential merchants. As he slides the door open and steps inside, a heavy silence falls over the room, the seated students turning their eyes toward their new instructor. He stands before the class, met immediately by the hostile gaze of a familiar face. The dark-skinned girl slams her hands onto her desk, her voice sharp with disbelief as she demands to know what he is doing there. He studies her for a moment, the memory of their previous encounter in a dark alleyway surfacing. He recalls slamming her against the cold ground, realizing now that her name is Iris. While she continues to shout her demands for an explanation, the rest of the students watch the confrontation with growing agitation, their voices joining the fray. He remains unmoved by her outburst, leaning over the front desk to deliver a blunt declaration. He is the instructor in charge of this class. She recoils in disgust, her eyes wide with fury as she tells him to go back where he came from, insisting they have nothing to learn from a coward. Her defiance emboldens the others, and soon the entire room erupts into a chorus of angry voices demanding his immediate departure. He observes the chaos with a detached gaze, noting the entitlement etched onto the faces of his new pupils. The man leans in closer, his expression darkening as he calls the entire room a collection of idiots. He silences them with a harsh reminder of their status, pointing out that as the weakest first years in the academy, they have no right to choose who teaches them. This cold reality settles over the room like a shroud, leaving the students in a stunned, heavy silence as he challenges them to think about why someone like him was assigned to them. He informs the class with brutal honesty that no other instructor was willing to put up with them, leaving him as their only option. He continues his disparaging remarks, claiming he was handed the worst possible assignment by being tasked with training the academy's weakest links. This prompts a student to speak up in defense of their peers, pointing out that Iris is a notable exception as one of the 5 most powerful students in the entire school. They listen as he admits that her ki is indeed far superior to the rest of the failures in the room. He then begins to explain the specific reason for her exceptional strength. He explains that her strength is a necessity, as it is her fundamental duty to serve as the dedicated bodyguard for Alice. While she remains focused on her book, he declares his total lack of interest in the job, announcing that since he isn't there by choice, he won't be teaching them anything, and it is now self-study time. He leaves the students in a state of collective shock, their whispers filling the room as they process his blatant neglect. They quickly turn their shock into defiance, resolving to grow stronger through their own hard work rather than relying on a man they now despise as a coward. They immediately put their words into action, some dropping to the floor for physical training while others dive into their studies, united in their goal to prove their instructor wrong. He and the rest of the students are under the watchful, weary gaze of their new instructor, who leans against a desk, silently evaluating the room from a distance. Shifting his focus, he decides to check on the others, noting that among the group, only Iris seems to possess any real merit as she diligently performs push-ups in the middle of the classroom. Suddenly, a sharp tug pulls a book right out of Alice's hands, catching her completely off guard as she was attempting to study. Holding the confiscated volume, he commands everyone to set aside their books and begin push-ups, announcing his intention to test their physical strength rather than their academic knowledge. Alice can only stare in confusion, questioning what he is doing. The sudden change in direction leaves the room in a state of confusion, with the princess questioning why their promised self-study time has been so abruptly replaced by physical labor. Ignoring the general murmurs of the class, he singles her out, calling her name to draw her full attention to the task at hand. She looks down, her face flushing with a mix of exertion and uncertainty as a realization begins to dawn on her regarding his true motives for this sudden test. Despite her efforts, she is forced to admit her physical weakness, collapsing onto the floor with a soft thud after failing to complete even a single repetition. He remains unmoved by her struggle, crouching down to her level and demanding that she demonstrate the movement once more so he can observe her form. With a determined breath, she pushes herself up again, unaware that he is watching her every movement with intense, analytical precision. She collapses onto the floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the weight of her own body proves too much to lift. Frustration clouds her features, the realization hitting her that sheer effort alone isn't enough to overcome her physical limitations. Watching her struggle, the instructor offers a new perspective, suggesting that she attempt the exercise once more, but with a specific focus. He instructs her to channel her internal energy, her ki, exclusively into her upper body rather than letting it dissipate aimlessly. His instruction relies on the principle that while ki can flow through the entire form, it is most effective when concentrated where it is needed most. Since the strain of a push-up falls upon the arms and chest, any energy lingering in the lower limbs or head is effectively wasted potential. Taking his advice to heart, the young noblewoman steadies herself, her expression shifting from defeat to intense concentration. She clenches her fists against the wooden floor, mentally gathering every ounce of her meager energy and directing it toward her shoulders and arms. Her body rises steadily from the ground for the first time with a sudden burst of effort. The movement is clean and controlled, a stark contrast to her previous failed attempts, catching even her mentor off guard. Elated by her success, she beams with a newfound sense of accomplishment, while the instructor notes her natural aptitude for precise energy control. He admits that her ability to isolate and direct her ki to specific muscle groups is quite impressive. She modestly explains that because she lacks significant physical strength or a large reservoir of energy, she has always had to rely on the speed and efficiency of her internal circulation. This revelation provides the instructor with a clearer understanding of her unique talents. Her efforts having proven fruitful, the instructor dismisses the focused training and allows the students to return to their independent studies. He declares that he now has a firm understanding of what each of them is truly capable of achieving. Meanwhile, outside the training hall, the atmosphere remains tense as students from the elite classes move through the academy grounds. Among them, the fierce rival from the first class walks with a contemplative expression, perhaps sensing the shifting dynamics within the ninth class. Her presence fading into the distance, the instructor reflects on his own journey while looking out over the academy. He ponders the idea that by guiding these students and witnessing their growth, he might find the path to increasing his own strength as well. He stands by the window, lost in thought about the precariousness of his position. If the current situation persists, he realizes he might face dismissal, yet the restrictive conditions make effective instruction nearly impossible. His gaze shifts to the courtyard below, where a commotion catches his eye. Observing the gathering crowd, he wonders if a physical altercation has already begun among the students. Down on the grounds, Alice watches with growing unease as a confrontational figure looms nearby. The newcomer, a student from the elite class with a predatory grin, seems to be the source of the tension. She witnesses several of her classmates cowering on the ground, their spirits broken by the relentless harassment. One of them cries out in desperation, begging for the torment to finally end. The aggressor, a girl with sharp fangs and a haughty demeanor, remains unmoved by the plea. She boldly declares her intent to continue, asserting that those in the ninth class exist solely to serve as targets for the superior students of the first class. She continues her verbal assault, labeling the lower-ranked students as a collection of cowards who have no place in the academy. In her eyes, they are nothing more than trash who rely on their family's wealth to compensate for their utter lack of martial talent. This cruel assessment prompts Alice to speak up, her voice steady despite the intimidation. She challenges the bully, pointing out that such arrogant claims are merely the product of an overinflated ego. The elite student doesn't deny the charge, instead offering a chilling justification. She argues that in their world, it is raw strength that grants one the right to have an ego in the first place. She leans in, her expression fierce as she makes a final, brutal promise. As long as she maintains her status as one of the academy's strongest, she intends to treat the ninth class as nothing more than her personal punching bags. Her victims can only watch in stunned silence, the weight of her words sinking in. The gap between the classes feels wider than ever as the confrontation reaches a boiling point. She sneers at the group, using Alice's admission of their nature to further her mockery, labeling the entire ninth class as nothing but a collection of cowards. Alice, standing her ground despite her trembling, counters that while they may lack courage, they possess a kindness of heart that the elite class lacks. The bully's expression shifts to a predatory grin as she decides it is time to strip away that noble sentiment and reveal the ugliness she believes lies beneath. She issues a sadistic challenge, ordering the three boys to trade blows with one another, promising the victor a temporary reprieve from her relentless harassment. This cruel ultimatum leaves the students paralyzed with fear and desperation, while Alice watches in silent horror as the situation begins to spiral out of control. Driven by a frantic need for self-preservation, the boys begin to strike one another, their desperate blows landing with sickening thuds as Alice rushes forward, pleading for them to stop this madness. The antagonist erupts into mocking laughter at the sight, declaring that their willingness to turn on each other proves they are truly despicable and rotten to the core. Ignoring the mockery, the young noblewoman stands firm once more, her voice cracking as she demands an end to the public humiliation of her fellow students. Her demand is met with a cold smirk as the bully leans in, her fangs bared while she makes it clear that she has no intention of stopping her torment of the ninth class. With a sudden, violent motion, she swings her hand toward Alice, the air whistling as the strike nears its target. The sound of a sharp impact echoes through the courtyard, signaling a sudden and violent interruption to the assault. Nicholas steps in, placing a steadying hand on the young princess's shoulder. His voice is calm but firm as he commands the aggressor to stop, pointing out that she is clearly provoking a fight. The antagonist, her fangs bared in a predatory smirk, doesn't hide her malice. She admits her desire was to mar the girl's features, clicking her tongue in frustration as her fun is interrupted. With a final, biting remark about her target's royal lineage being her only protection, she turns and stalks away. The two left behind watch her go, the tension in the courtyard slowly beginning to ebb. Looking up at her protector, she addresses him by his new title, acknowledging the bond that has formed between student and mentor. Tears well in her eyes as the weight of her perceived failure as an elven princess settles in. She laments her inability to protect others, but he offers a pragmatic comfort, reminding her that the odds were stacked against her from the start. Driven by this vulnerability, she voices a new, desperate ambition. She must become stronger. He watches her closely, questioning if she is truly prepared for the cost, but she remains steadfast. Her resolve hardens, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She declares her willingness to sacrifice anything, even her own humanity, to protect those she holds dear. He listens, noting the firmness of her spirit. A faint, knowing smile touches his lips. He accepts her plea, promising to lead her down the arduous path she has chosen. He offers a final warning, noting that this path may lead to being labeled a coward by her peers, a burden his previous student found unbearable. She remains undeterred, her mind made up. She asserts that no insult can sway her, for her purpose is far greater than her reputation. Her only concern is the safety of those she loves. She bows deeply, her voice trembling with a mix of desperation and resolve as she begs him to take her on as his disciple. He looks down at her, a faint, knowing smirk playing on his lips as he observes the princess's unwavering commitment. In the quiet of the classroom, the chalkboard clearly displays the instructions for self-study. At the front desk, the instructor has completely succumbed to exhaustion, his head resting heavily on his arms as he dozes. While he remains in a deep slumber, the rest of the students sit in a tense, awkward silence, their eyes darting between their books and the sleeping man at the front of the room. This stillness is abruptly shattered when the aggressive student from the first class approaches his desk, her hands slamming down with a loud rattle that echoes through the chamber. She doesn't stop there, reaching out to seize him by the collar of his dark vest and hoisting him upward. He remains remarkably calm, merely questioning if this is the appropriate way for a student to treat their superior. Her eyes narrow with fury as she scoffs at the very idea of him being a teacher, pointing out with a snarl that he has yet to provide them with a single lesson. He lets out a weary sigh, reiterating his previous stance that he has no intention of teaching anyone as long as he lacks the motivation to do so, even as she continues to tug at his clothes in frustration. Before she can react, he executes a movement so swift it's nearly invisible, sending her stumbling back until she hits the floor with a heavy thud. As the other students murmur in disbelief at the display of skill, he coldly tells them that if they want to learn, they should do it on their own. He then claps his hands sharply, the sound ringing out like a whip crack as he commands the class to return to their silence and resume their self-study. Just as the room begins to settle, the door slides open with a bang and Alice rushes in, breathless and disheveled. She frantically apologizes for her tardiness, explaining that despite leaving the Elven Kingdom before dawn, the journey was simply too long to make it on time. She trots into the room, her arrival immediately drawing the attention of her companion. Iris questions her about the urgent business she was supposed to attend to, and she confirms that it has been settled. Catching her breath, she explains that the rush was so great she had to jog the entire way to make it to class on time. She gently declines Iris's request to tag along next time, insisting that this specific endeavor is part of her own personal training. With a bright, determined smile, she makes a startling announcement. She has officially become the new instructor's disciple. This revelation sends Iris into a protective frenzy, as she vehemently protests the idea, labeling the man a coward who will surely take advantage of her royal friend. She is met with a newfound sternness as the princess commands her to stop immediately, warning her not to besmirch the reputation of her chosen teacher. Stunned by the rebuke, she instantly pivots and offers a deep, formal bow to the instructor, offering a sincere apology for her previous rudeness. While she remains bowed in apology, a sudden, swift movement cuts through the air. Her strike is met with practiced ease as he lifts his leg to effortlessly check the surprise kick aimed at his midsection. He acknowledges the cleverness of the ploy, remarking that using an apology to create an opening was a solid strategy, though she simply laughs, admitting she knew it was a long shot. He remains unimpressed by the princess's clumsy attempt at a surprise attack, noting that such maneuvers require stealth to be effective. Around them, the other students whisper in shock, struggling to process the news that a royal is now officially apprenticed to a commoner. With a confident smirk, the instructor informs his new disciple that they have unfinished business to attend to before their formal training begins. He declares it is time to confront the orc student who humiliated her the previous day, while she eagerly asks if he intends to teach her his secret techniques. Moments later, they arrive at the imposing entrance of the first-class wing, a place far more opulent than the lower-tier classrooms. He decides they will enter through the back door to maintain an element of surprise, despite her nervous questioning about the proper protocol for entering such a prestigious area. Peering through the narrow gap of the sliding door, he scans the room, his eyes sharp and calculating as he locates their target. The classroom is filled with elite students, all focused on a lecture being delivered by a formal instructor at the front of the hall. The sudden intrusion causes a ripple of confusion among the seated pupils. The lecturer stops mid-sentence, demanding to know the reason for the interruption. The intruder calmly acknowledges the sharp senses of the first-class students, showing no intimidation in the face of the senior faculty member. As the room erupts in murmurs, he states his purpose clearly. He has come to confront the student who bullied one of his own. The tension in the air thickens as the elite students realize this is no mere social visit. He locks eyes with the orc student, his voice cold and unwavering as he commands her to step outside. She looks back with a mixture of surprise and growing irritation at his audacity. In response, she leans back with a mocking giggle, questioning if the royal girl has become so desperate that she now relies on a teacher to settle her petty grudges. The other students watch the confrontation with rapt attention. Her expression shifts into a predatory sneer, her sharp fangs bared as she delivers a final, stinging insult, calling the princess's reliance on others truly pathetic. She watches with a mocking grin as the instructor clarifies that he has no intention of engaging her in combat himself. When she demands to know who his champion will be, he remains calm. He gently guides the young princess forward, placing her directly in the path of the confrontation. With a steady voice, he announces that she will be the one to face the challenge. A heavy silence falls over the lecture hall as the students process the declaration. It is broken only by a sharp, derisive laugh from the challenger. She finds the proposition absurd, likening the potential match to a lion preying upon a helpless bunny. Behind her, the other elite students join in the mockery, their laughter echoing through the room. Undeterred by the ridicule, the instructor raises 3 fingers to emphasize his point. He acknowledges that while the princess lacks the strength to win today, he only requires 3 months to prepare her. His expression is one of absolute certainty as he guarantees that by the end of that period, she will possess the power to claim victory. The rival remains unconvinced, scoffing at the idea that such a short time could bridge the gap in their abilities. She insults his teaching credentials, dismissing him as a fraud who could never produce such results. As the tension peaks, the instructor doubles down, insisting that under his tutelage, the princess will undoubtedly overpower her opponent. However, his bold claim is interrupted by a stern, authoritative presence watching from the doorway. A heavy footfall signals the arrival of the academy's leader. He speaks with cold disdain, accusing the instructor of securing his position through nothing more than nepotism and deceitful maneuvers. He steps fully into the room, a palpable and menacing aura of power radiating from his frame. The surrounding students recoil in silence as the weight of his presence fills the air, signaling a dire turn in the confrontation. He acknowledges the intensity of the younger man's presence, noting that the sheer force of his spirit is sharp enough to feel like a physical blade stabbing through him. The elder questions if the display of power has instilled any fear, but Nicola remains unmoved, asserting his own superior strength with cold, unwavering confidence. Instead of engaging in a further battle of wills, he points a finger directly at the man, acknowledging his status as the academy's head before dismissing the weight of the moment entirely. With a sudden, explosive movement, he drives a heavy boot into the man's stomach, the force of the blow folding the elder in half and sending him reeling backward. This sudden act of violence leaves the onlookers, including the young princess and her rival, frozen in a state of utter disbelief at the instructor's audacity. As the man collapses onto the floor with a dull thud, Nicholas stands over him, his expression unreadable as the tension in the room reaches a breaking point. Shifting his gaze to the dark-skinned student and her companions, he makes it clear that Alice will be ready for their duel in 3 months, sternly advising the first-class group that neither he nor his pupil will tolerate underhanded tactics. He stands firmly beside Alice, issuing a final challenge to the elite students to meet them in the arena when the time for their classes to compete finally arrives. As the group prepares to depart, the defeated figure remains crumpled on the floor, his body spasming from the impact, while a final, cold promise of retribution for his behavior hangs in the air. The grand architecture of the academy looms over the grounds, a silent witness to the shift in power and the beginning of a grueling 3-month countdown toward the inevitable clash. Alice stands hesitantly before the entrance to a residence, her fingers tracing the bow on her uniform as she wonders if her visit is appropriate. Her contemplation is interrupted by a group of rough-looking men who call out to her, their leader demanding to know if the young elf is an associate of Nicola. They loom over her from a distance, one of the subordinates mocking the idea that a man like Nicola could even have friends. The thugs begin pounding aggressively on the gate, shouting for Nicola to face them, while assuming Alice is there to seek her own revenge for the humiliation he caused. Nicola eventually pulls the gate open, looking disheveled and rubbing sleep from his eyes as he greets Alice, seemingly oblivious to the shouting men. They are taken aback when Alice confirms that the man is indeed her instructor, their confusion quickly turning to hostility. The leader sneers at the revelation, branding Alice a coward just like her teacher and insulting her character. Nicola suddenly lunges forward, silencing the man with a single, powerful blow that sends him crashing to the ground. Alice cries out in shock, demanding to know why he would resort to such sudden violence against the group. He remains unfazed, explaining that he simply treated the nuisance like a blaring alarm clock that needed to be silenced. He stood firm, his voice calm as he addressed the intruders, explaining that his actions weren't random, but a response to their own warped logic. Continuing his interrogation, he reminded them of their true nature as bandits, questioning if their grudge stemmed from the time he captured their leader and delivered him to the authorities. The bald man spat back, blaming him for the collapse of their organization, which had splintered into warring factions in the absence of their chief. He declared his intent to kill his rival and reclaim his position at the top, claiming it would prevent further internal bloodshed, while Alice watched the confrontation with growing concern. The instructor met this declaration with a mocking smile, casually accepting the label of scum if it meant they were finally speaking the same language. He then revealed that the bounty from their former boss had been distributed to those in need, a claim that shocked Alice but was immediately dismissed by the bandit as a blatant lie. The bandit leader, consumed by rage, ground his teeth as his eyes narrowed, swearing a lethal oath to take the young man's life. They lunged forward in a coordinated strike, with one thug shouting a warning to watch out for a low blow, fully expecting the same groin-kicking tactic used in their previous encounter. Instead of a kick, a heavy fist connected squarely with the leader's jaw, sending a spray of blood into the air and catching the attackers completely off guard. He stood over the fallen bandit, listening to the subordinates' confusion over the change in tactics before dryly remarking that he held no special fixation on such dishonorable strikes. He explains his tactical philosophy, noting that he always assesses the situation to choose the most effective move. He admits that his frequent targeting of the groin is a calculated choice, designed to exploit a common vulnerability and force a predictable reaction. This focus, he continues, forces opponents who are aware of his reputation to over-prioritize protecting that specific area. By doing so, they inadvertently leave the rest of their defenses wide open for a different, more decisive strike. Turning his gaze back to the remaining threat, he issues a cold warning. Any attempt to use the young noblewoman as a hostage will result in him breaking the man's neck instantly. Behind him, she peers out, finally understanding that the entire confrontation has been a carefully laid trap. Seeing an opportunity for growth, he suggests that she take this chance to finish the job herself. She hesitates, her voice trembling as she questions if she is truly ready for such a violent task. Despite her fear, she steels her resolve, clenching her fists as a faint glow of magical energy begins to manifest around her hands. The bandit, however, is incensed by the perceived insult, roaring that he won't be defeated by a mere elf. He realizes too late that his earlier hesitation was a mistake. He had assumed the instructor wouldn't strike while a student was nearby, but the man had no such qualms. With a sudden, forceful blow, she strikes the bandit, sending him crashing to the ground. He groans in pain and humiliation, lamenting the lack of honor in the attack as he collapses into the dirt. Standing amidst the fallen criminals, the instructor remains unmoved by their plight, telling his student to view these men as nothing more than living training dummies. He reminds her of the thousands of innocents these bandits have slaughtered, stripping them of any right to mercy or complaint. He looks down at the defeated men, musing that it would be a waste not to utilize them for their intended purpose. To him, they are simply physical manifestations of accumulated sin, existing solely to be struck down for the benefit of his students. Just as the tension begins to settle, a frantic voice screams his name from across the area. He turns, his eyes widening in surprise at the sudden, loud interruption that breaks the silence of the aftermath. He delivers a swift, merciless kick to the bandit's groin, the impact echoing with a dull thud as the man collapses. Nearby, Alice watches the display with a mixture of shock and exhaustion, her eyes closed as she tries to process the sheer pragmatism of the strike. As he walks away from the fallen criminal, he casually explains that by provoking the man, he forced him to lower his guard, creating the perfect opening for such a low blow. He emphasizes to Alice that in a real fight, there are countless ways to manufacture an advantage. Alice, however, remains slumped over, clearly overwhelmed by the unconventional lesson. He flashes a confident, encouraging thumbs up, seemingly proud of the tactical demonstration. The young princess can only stare back in silence, a single bead of sweat rolling down her face as she struggles to reconcile his cheerful demeanor with the ruthless efficiency he just displayed. With the lesson concluded, she makes her way back toward the academy's heavy doors, leaving the battlefield behind. On the stone path, the defeated bandit remains sprawled out, his body twitching sporadically in the wake of the instructor's final, agonizing blow. The young man sits quietly on a wooden porch, savoring a warm drink while his companion, Alice, enjoys a snack beside him. The atmosphere is peaceful, a rare moment of respite from their training at the academy. They have arrived at Satella's residence, a grand estate that stands as a testament to her family's long-standing prestige and history. Inside, he leads her through the various wings of the house, pointing out the dedicated dojo for martial practice and the expansive library filled with ancient knowledge. As they walk through the towering shelves, he explains that his family has been a lineage of martial artists for generations, and among these books are the secret manuscripts of Korn, a legendary fighter from the hero Roy's party. Alice is visibly impressed by the sheer volume of history surrounding them. He pauses, his mind drifting to the writings of Korn, which describe Roy as a man of humble character, a stark contrast to the current hero, whose name he refuses to even utter. Noticing his change in mood, she asks if he is acquainted with the current hero. He responds with a bitter edge, admitting that the individual is on a level so low he feels ashamed to even acknowledge their connection. The memories of betrayal resurface as he recounts how that man literally stabbed him in the back and stole all of his equipment. Alice listens intently, surprised by the revelation, as she had heard rumors that the current hero was actually quite amicable. She then clarifies a point of confusion, noting that the current hero is actually a woman. This piece of information catches him completely off guard. Stunned, he stares into the distance, trying to reconcile this new fact with his own past. He wonders if it could even be possible that the person who betrayed him has been replaced, or if there is more to the story than he realized. The conversation shifts toward the broader political landscape, specifically the yearly tournament organized by the Kingdom of Sighs. The goal of the event is to identify the hero, the strongest warrior destined to lead the fight against the Demon Lord. He admits to his past, confirming to Alice that he was indeed a member of a hero's party, specifically, the one led by the hero Jay, though it is a history he would much rather leave behind. Continuing his explanation, the instructor clarifies that his position wasn't a royal appointment. Rather, he was brought in through personal ties after being invited by a magician and a swordswoman he once knew. Alice's eyes widen in genuine admiration at the revelation. She quickly connects the dots, asking if he refers to the legendary Lady Mary and Lady Jessica, whose names are celebrated throughout the Sighs kingdom as elite combatants. While he doesn't claim a deep personal bond, he acknowledges their formidable reputation. She is left puzzled by this realization, questioning why he remains in obscurity while his former companions enjoy such widespread fame and popularity. The young noblewoman then recalls a specific rumor regarding a martial artist in that party who was notorious for employing underhanded or cowardly tactics. With a grim expression, he confirms that those rumors were indeed about him. He elaborates on the friction within the group, explaining how Jay's obsession with his public image led him to suppress any mention of these effective but unconventional exploits, eventually resulting in his dismissal. Alice is struck by how thoroughly his contributions were erased from history. Observing the weight of these memories on his face, she offers a quiet moment of empathy, recognizing the hardships he must have endured during his time with the hero. Seeking to shift the heavy atmosphere, she turns her attention to the present, inquiring about Jay's current whereabouts and activities. He shares the grim news he received, noting that the former hero reportedly lost his key to the Demon Lord during their final confrontation and has since fallen into a pathetic state. He reflects coldly that the party was never strong enough to survive without his support. As he looks away, he muses that a man as prideful as Jay would never allow himself to be seen by his former allies while he is at such a humiliating low point in his life. He listens as Alice shares her relief, noting that it's good he doesn't hold a grudge against those who cast him out, and that Jay is still among the living. His expression darkens, a cold smirk playing on his lips as he clarifies that his lack of resentment isn't born of kindness. Rather, he is delighted at the chance to exact vengeance with his own hands, refusing to let them escape through an easy death. This chilling admission leaves her speechless, her wide eyes reflecting a sudden, unsettling realization about the man standing before her. Sensing the heavy atmosphere, he abruptly steers the conversation back to the task at hand, declaring that the vast library surrounding them serves as one of the 3 fundamental pillars of his unique training regimen. He begins to break down his philosophy, explaining that the first pillar involves identifying an opponent's most vulnerable openings, such as the eyes or the groin, while the second focuses on situational control, and the third relies on the deep well of knowledge found within these texts. The towering shelves are packed with records of martial arts from every corner of the world and every era of history, offering a breadth of striking and grappling techniques for her to master. With a confident glint in his eye, he asks if the prospect of such unconventional power excites her, though she can only offer a hesitant, slightly overwhelmed look in response. She observes that his methods are unlike anything she has ever encountered, prompting him to explain that while most warriors blindly rely on brute strength and ki, his system is built on a foundation of logic and strategy that others simply ignore. He reassures her that with these techniques, her chances of defeating the orc student are far higher than she might think, regardless of her current physical limitations. As he watches her, he reflects on the arrogance of their enemies. Those who assume victory is guaranteed never prepare for failure, and it is precisely this underestimation of her potential that will give them the winning edge. He sat comfortably on the sofa, sipping his tea while explaining the next phase of their preparation. He noted that before they could proceed, he needed to gauge her current abilities, especially since they had ample time to study their upcoming adversary. Alice, however, seemed puzzled by his methodical approach, wondering exactly what he intended to do. Continuing his explanation, he clarified that the world of martial arts was vast, filled with a myriad of styles that no one could hope to master in a mere 3 months. Therefore, their strategy would be to identify the specific discipline that best suited her natural inclinations and focus their efforts there. He began to categorize martial artists into 2 primary groups, starting with strikers. These individuals prioritize reach over raw muscle, favoring a tall, lean physique to maximize the impact of their punches and kicks to inflict damage on their opponents. In contrast to the strikers, he described the grapplers, who rely on immense physical power to seize and throw their opponents. For them, muscle mass is the ultimate priority, as their entire style revolves around the strength of their grip and the force of their takedowns. After considering these 2 paths, she looked down at her own slender frame and then back at him with a look of realization. To his visible surprise, she admitted that she didn't feel a natural affinity for either category, leaving her wondering where she truly belonged. He quickly cautioned her against such hasty conclusions, explaining that physical build wasn't the only factor in determining one's path. Despite his reassurance, she couldn't help but feel a pang of doubt, questioning if her lack of an obvious specialty meant she possessed no real talent for combat at all. He went on to explain that personality played just as vital a role as physique. Strikers, he noted, must maintain their composure to create openings, while grapplers often prioritize defense, absorbing blows while waiting for the perfect moment to lock their opponent into a counterattack. After reflecting on his words, she stood with a newfound sense of clarity. She concluded that, based on her own temperament and how she processed the heat of a fight, she felt a much stronger connection to the disciplined mindset of a striker. With her choice made, he suddenly slammed a massive stack of heavy volumes onto the table with a resounding thud. He informed her that her first task was to digest every single page of this extensive research before the day was through, much to her overwhelming surprise. As she began to pore over the texts, a warm smile spread across her face, and she playfully remarked that she had always known he was more than just the coward others perceived him to be. He simply accepted the compliment with a calm nod, continuing to enjoy his tea as his student delved into her studies. He pauses for a moment, a flicker of realization or perhaps just a stray thought crossing his mind as he looks off to the side with a contemplative expression. Because of this sudden shift in his demeanor, Alice begins to shower him with praise, insisting he is an amazing person, though he remains skeptical, questioning if her opinion of him had truly been so low until this point. In response to her enthusiasm, he abruptly changes the day's itinerary, tasking her with finishing the entire stack of books before noon, leaving her staring at the daunting pile in stunned silence. Later that day, the 2 arrive in the bustling city of Shanoa, where he reflects on his resolve to prove his strength through honest means rather than relying on the underhanded tactics he is known for. As they navigate the packed streets, the chatter of the crowd reveals that the unusual congestion is due to a visit from a renowned hero, drawing people from all over. This news brings back memories of Hero Jay, who is constantly besieged by adoring fans, a stark reminder of the immense popularity and status heroes command wherever they go. Seeking a different environment, he decides their next destination will be a local gambling den, a large and imposing structure that stands out against the city skyline. Upon reaching the entrance, he casually greets the man in charge, signaling their arrival at the establishment with a familiar ease. The manager, a man of refined appearance and sharp eyes, welcomes him and expresses his pleasure at seeing Princess Alice faring well, acknowledging her royal status immediately. When the manager questions if they have met before, he simply introduces her as his disciple, while she offers a polite but confused greeting, unsure of the man's identity. She stands quietly as Nicola explains his intention to demonstrate his strength to her, prompting the manager to realize the purpose of their visit. He confidently requests to be signed up for a match, his gaze steady and determined. In response, the manager warmly welcomes him back, assuring him that he has just the thing in mind as Nicola demands the most formidable opponent available. Because he seeks a true challenge, he even suggests a handicap, which the manager finds amusing before mentioning a participant of such overwhelming power that no suitable match had been found until now. To level the playing field, the manager presents a specialized ring designed to suppress 2/3 of a warrior's ki, a condition he accepts without hesitation. With the terms settled, the manager gestures for them to follow him deeper into the facility. They soon arrive at a grand chamber, where a complex magical seal begins to pulse with light on the floor. As they approach the circle, he asks if his companion can accompany him, leading the manager to warn that any assistance from her would result in immediate disqualification. He dismisses the concern, bluntly stating she would only be a hindrance if she tried to interfere. Despite the unusual request, the manager agrees to make an exception and instructs them to step into the teleportation circle. Standing together within the glowing runes, they prepare for the transition as the manager offers a final word of luck. He stands by the glowing teleportation circle as the light fades, his mind already on the next move. An attendant approaches, awaiting instructions as the high-stakes match begins. Handing over a heavy pouch, the manager instructs the man to wager 100 gold coins on Nicola's victory. The attendant hesitates, his voice trembling as he reminds his master of the terrifying reputation of the woman Nicola is set to face, but the order remains firm. A confident smile plays on his lips as he dismisses the concern, stating his absolute certainty in Nicola's triumph. To him, the overwhelming odds against the newcomer only make the potential payout of such a long shot more enticing. Far from the gambling den, a harsh wind sweeps across a desolate, sun-drenched wasteland, kicking up dust against a backdrop of distant, jagged mountains. Having just materialized in this barren arena, the instructor and his young companion find themselves face-to-face with a lone figure waiting in the distance, her presence radiating a quiet intensity. The warrior, a woman clad in gleaming plate, eyes them with cold indifference, questioning if the man before her is the intended opponent or if the task falls to the girl hiding in his shadow. Stepping forward to shield Alice, he calmly confirms that he is indeed the one she is meant to fight. She shrugs, indifferent to which of them she must break, and draws her blade from its sheath with a sharp, metallic ring that echoes across the empty plain. With a condescending smirk, she challenges him to provide at least a minute of entertainment before the end. He meets her gaze with unyielding intensity, coolly remarking that the sentiment is entirely mutual. Her expression shifts to one of mild annoyance when she realizes he truly doesn't recognize her. He takes in her polished white armor, noting that she carries the unmistakable air of a high-ranking adventurer, despite his lack of specific knowledge regarding her identity. Acknowledging his guess, she admits to her past life as a celebrated warrior while noting his unfamiliar face. She demands to know exactly who has been sent to challenge her in this godforsaken place, her curiosity piqued by his lack of fear. She stands ready as Nicola turns to Alice, confidently declaring the upcoming match will be effortless. He reminds his companion that their opponent is a former adventurer, suggesting this is a perfect opportunity to witness his true strength from the front row. He raises a single finger, calmly asserting that it is all he will require to defeat her. This blatant display of confidence causes the woman to tremble with rage, her voice shaking as she demands he stop mocking her. He offers even more handicaps, maintaining that his intentions are not to belittle but to demonstrate the gap in their abilities. He stands relaxed, his posture open and unthreatening despite the tension in the air. His words linger as her gaze narrows, her eyes filled with a cold, focused determination to strike down the man standing before her. She lunges forward with a sudden, explosive strike, but he shifts his weight with fluid grace, the air whistling as her blow misses its mark entirely. He leans in close, his expression unreadable as he quietly declares the confrontation finished. The woman's eyes widen in disbelief, her momentum halted by his sheer composure. Because of his swift movement, she finds herself striking at empty air, the sound of her missed attack echoing through the desolate arena. The warrior unleashes a flurry of desperate sword strikes, her blade cutting through the air in a frantic rhythm. Despite the speed of her assault, he weaves through the steel with impossible ease, leaving her to scream in frustration at how he can possibly evade every move. She is left vulnerable as he reaches out, his hand moving with a speed she cannot track. With a simple, matter-of-fact explanation, he tells her the reason for his dominance is simply that he is the stronger combatant. He delivers a sharp flick to her forehead, the impact sending a shockwave through her and forcing her back. The duel, which she had taken so seriously, is ended by a gesture of trivial effort. She remains stunned as Nicola turns his attention away, seeking validation from Alice. He asks the princess if she witnessed his true strength, and she responds with genuine surprise, admitting he is formidable even without his usual underhanded methods. While they talk, the defeated warrior wobbles on her feet, her mind racing with the humiliation of the defeat. She can't fathom that she is losing, convinced that her opponent views her as nothing more than a weakling. This internal turmoil boils over into a desperate cry as she shouts that she isn't weak at all, her eyes wide with a mixture of rage and denial. He responds to her outburst with a cold reminder of the reality. She was just bested by a man using only a single finger. With a dismissive shrug, he invites her to come at him again, promising to fight seriously this time, which only causes her to grit her teeth in silent fury. Driven by desperation, she lunges forward with a swift, sweeping strike, hoping to catch him off guard while his back is turned. The attempt is futile, as he effortlessly bats her away with a sharp slap, treating her attack as nothing more than a nuisance. Instead of finishing her, he uses the moment as a live demonstration for Alice, explaining that her clumsy uppercut was a tactical error. He instructs the princess that such moves must be part of a larger combination to be effective, while the defeated woman can only listen in stunned silence as she is used as a prop for a lesson. The weight of the humiliation finally breaks her, and she bursts into uncontrollable sobs. He looks on with a touch of confusion, bluntly stating that he hasn't done anything to warrant such a tearful reaction. She collapses to her knees, her spirit crushed as she mutters about the impossible burden she carries, believing the very fate of humanity rests upon her shoulders. He begins to walk away, letting out a weary sigh at how tedious the encounter turned out to be. Over his shoulder, he offers one final piece of advice, telling her that the weight of the world is too much for one person and that she needs to open her eyes to the reality of her own limitations. He seizes the opportunity to turn the combat into a live demonstration, pulling the struggling swordswoman into a tight grappling hold and calling for his student to observe the technique closely. As she draws nearer, he explains that such maneuvers encompass more than simple throws, functioning as intricate locks designed to immobilize an opponent. She immediately recognizes the similarity to the tactics he once employed against her sister, Iris. With the lesson concluded for the moment, he releases his grip, allowing the defeated woman to slump unceremoniously to the ground. He admits that the sheer volume of such techniques is too vast to cover in a single session, promising to continue her instruction at a later date, much to her enthusiastic agreement. He claps his hands together to clear the dust, his expression one of mild disappointment as he declares the entire match a letdown. Without another word to his fallen foe, he decides it is time for them to depart. Meanwhile, the spectators watching from afar are plunged into a heavy, stunned silence. The manager and his associates stare in disbelief, unable to process the swift and total defeat they have just witnessed through their remote viewing device. Through the shimmering surface of the scrying orb, the reality of the situation becomes undeniable. The celebrated hero lies broken in the dirt while the instructor and the princess walk away. The impossible has happened. The hero has lost. The princess gazes into the distance, her expression clouded by a somber realization as the weight of recent events begins to settle. Standing near her, the celebrated warrior Jay maintains a sharp, confident look, seemingly unaffected by the brewing storm that threatens the kingdom's peace. Her younger sister, Alice, watches with a mixture of concern and uncertainty, sensing the subtle shift in the atmosphere of the royal court. The source of their unease was a report that had begun to circulate through the land. The legendary hero, long thought invincible, had been defeated by a martial artist from the Republic of Shanoa. Because of this unprecedented loss, the news spread like wildfire across the continent, from the demon lord's domain to the elf kingdom, shaking the very foundations of the Sai's kingdom. In the bustling streets of Sai's town, the capital, the defeat became the sole topic of conversation among a restless populace struggling to reconcile the myth with reality. Within the walls of a crowded tavern, the mood turned sour as patrons began to openly ridicule the fallen idol, questioning how a mere martial artist could have bested such a figure. Among the patrons, Jay sat in grim silence, his frustration mounting as a companion mockingly addressed him as a former hero, while offering to pay for his next drink. He ignored the gesture, watching as the man boasted about the resilience required of true adventurers, seemingly oblivious to the warrior's growing ire. Driven to his limit by the constant disrespect, he finally roared his defiance, declaring that he was no mere adventurer, but still a hero of the realm. He clenches his jaw as the man across the table laughs, dismissively telling him he can call himself whatever he likes. The mockery is palpable, a sharp sting to his pride that he struggles to swallow. Looking away, he is haunted by memories of his former companions, Alice and Iris. A cold realization settles in his gut. The party has been a hollow shell of its former self ever since Nicola was cast out, unable to function as it once did. The ambient noise of the tavern swells around them, a chaotic backdrop of clinking glasses and boisterous laughter. His companion leans in, breaking the internal silence to ask if he has heard the latest rumors circulating through the city. The man delivers a crushing blow to his ego, reporting that the true hero has been defeated. He stammers in disbelief, insisting it is impossible for someone of her caliber, a warrior who could slaughter 100 demons without a single scratch, to be bested by anyone. His companion continues, explaining that the defeat wasn't at the hands of a monster, but a single human martial artist. The concept seems alien to him, his mind racing to comprehend how a mere practitioner of martial arts could overcome such legendary power. Desperate for a logical explanation, he asks if the opponent resorted to underhanded tricks or cowardly strikes. The man shakes his head, clarifying that the victor didn't need such things, allegedly handling the hero with the ease of a single finger. He falls into a stunned silence, his eyes wide as the weight of the news sinks in. The man notes his reaction, assuming that since he's heard the story, He must realize it couldn't possibly be the same Nicola they once knew. The man's next words are a thunderclap, confirming that the martial artist's name was indeed Nicola. He claps a hand onto the former hero's shoulder, laughing at the irony of his connections while a vision of the stoic instructor flashes through his mind. Sweat beads on his forehead as he grapples with the impossible truth. He wonders internally if the man he discarded has somehow achieved a level of strength far beyond what he possessed during their time together in the group. A predatory glint enters his eyes as a new, desperate plan takes root. He realizes that if he can somehow manipulate Nicola back into his service, the glory of the hero's title will once again be within his grasp. He stands up abruptly, the clatter of his armor echoing through the tavern as he prepares to depart. When his companion asks where he is headed in such a hurry, he simply replies that he is going to Shanoa. Stepping out into the crisp air, the knight adjusts his glove with a smirk, feeling a surge of renewed purpose. He believes that after a long streak of bad luck, the goddess of fortune has finally decided to smile upon him. Looking back at the rooftops of the town one last time, he sets his sights on the horizon with a determined gaze. In his mind, he calls out to his former comrade, urging Nicola to wait for his arrival. Far from the bustling towns of men, the moon hangs heavy over the jagged spires and dark architecture of the demon lord's domain. A cold wind sweeps through the silent streets of this forbidden territory. Within the dark halls, a young woman dressed as a servant stands before a seated figure who looms in the shadows. The official informs her of the hero's defeat and sighs and demands to know her thoughts on the matter. She bows her head submissively, her voice trembling as she claims her lowly opinion could not possibly matter to someone of his stature. The official mocks her humility, reminding her that she was once a powerful mage in the hero's party who slaughtered many of their kin. Trembling under his gaze, she confesses that she was once mistaken about the strength of humanity. She now admits with a forced smile that humans stand no chance against the overwhelming might of the demon lord's army. The official leans back, mentioning that the one who humiliated the hero was a martial artist. When he speaks the name Nicola, the young woman's eyes widen in sudden, sharp recognition. Tears well up in her eyes as a wave of relief washes over her, and she whispers the name of her former master under her breath. Knowing that he is still alive brings a flicker of genuine joy to her otherwise bleak existence. Reflecting on her past, she recalls how her unrequited love for Jay led her to stay in his party despite his neglect, only to be captured by the demons after she finally tried to return home. Now, having endured the harsh reality of her captivity, she finally understands the wisdom behind Nicola's past actions. She collapses into her hands, tears streaming down her face as she laments her delayed realization and begs for Nicola's forgiveness. Her sobbing is interrupted when the massive official seated before her asks if she desires a reunion with the man she once abandoned. He leans in, his single eye fixed on her as he explains their intent to lure Nicola into the demon army with a fortune, noting his current residence in the integrated Republic of Shanoa. The official then presents a formal offer. She is to act as their scout, and success will bring both her and Nicola the prestigious title of Marquis. However, this opportunity comes with a lethal price, as he warns that a curse will be placed upon her, ensuring her death should she attempt to flee her mission. Looking down at her as she kneels in the dim light of the chamber, he demands to know if she is prepared for the task, promising a life of comfort if she prevails. She stares back with newfound resolve, her voice steady as she accepts the dangerous bargain. Far from the dark halls of the demon stronghold, the rugged, snow-capped peaks of the border between the Republic of Shanoa and the demon lord's domain stand silent under a vast sky. Within a cold stone cell nearby, a prisoner with long, dark hair looks up in surprise as a guard announces she has an unexpected visitor. The woman, identified only as Prisoner 16, follows the guard into the corridor, her mind racing with questions about why a high-ranking general would seek an audience with her. She sits across from a man who introduces himself as General Risewood. He recognizes her as a former member of the hero's party, calling her by the name Jessica. Confirming her identity, she listens as he cuts to the chase, asking if she is familiar with a man named Nicola. The question triggers a flood of memories. She recalls how the hero's party crumbled after Nicola's departure and Jay's constant indiscretions. Her own path led to tragedy when she defended herself against a demi-human in her homeland, only to be abandoned by her kingdom to preserve diplomatic ties, eventually landing her in this very cell. With no means to pay her bail, she had resigned herself to serving out her sentence in silence. Seeing her recognition, the general's expression shifts slightly as she asks what Nicola could have possibly done to warrant an investigation. She explains that they weren't just teammates, but childhood friends who grew up together. This deep connection makes the general's next revelation even more staggering. Nicola defeated the hero in a fair duel. The news leaves her breathless, struggling to process the sheer impossibility of it. He continues, noting that their investigation found Nicola has been systematically dismantling local bandit groups and seizing their ill-gotten gains. While she finds his vigilante justice characteristic of the man she knew, the general reveals that the money wasn't kept, but sent to a specific household. Her heart stops when he clarifies that the recipients are her own mother and younger sister, who have been struggling in poverty. She listens in stunned silence as the general reveals the depth of her family's desperation. He explains that their income had vanished entirely after her imprisonment, and it was only Nicola's intervention that kept them from starvation. Because of this shocking revelation, she lashes out, her voice trembling as she accuses him of lying. He remains unmoved, calmly stating that his presence there is the result of a thorough investigation that traced the funds directly back to her former companion. The weight of the truth forces her to confront her own past blindness. She admits to herself that her devotion to Jay had clouded her judgment, leading her to believe every action he took was righteous, even when it meant betraying Nicola. Memories of the fallen hero flood her mind, recalling how Jay had once been a beacon of strength before his defeat by the demon lord transformed him into a shell of a man who sought only base pleasures. She finally understands that casting Nicola aside was a catastrophic mistake, and her tears begin to fall. Overcome with remorse, she pleads with the general to deliver a message of apology should their paths ever cross. In response, he flatly refuses her request, asserting that such a debt must be repaid in person. When she reminds him of her status as a captive, he leans in, his expression sharpening. He presents her with a choice, offering her freedom from the cold stone walls of her cell on one condition. She must bring Nicola over to their side. As she questions whether the military intends to conscript him, he clarifies that while his service would be welcomed, their primary concern is simply ensuring a man of his caliber remains within their borders to bolster the nation's strength. He elaborates on the fragile balance of power, noting that while other realms possess their own champions, the loss of key commanders to a rogue element could cause an entire military structure to crumble. She realizes the true nature of the request. They view Nicola not just as a soldier, but as a necessary deterrent to maintain the peace. The general confirms this, his gaze steady as he explains the country's desperate need for its own overwhelming force. He watches as she finally relents, her voice steady as she accepts the terms of her release. The general reiterates that her cooperation is the key to bringing the man they seek into their fold, while she silently clenches her fist in her lap, a physical manifestation of the weight of her decision. She looks away, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek as she reflects on the man's desire for a quiet life, a peace she is now tasked with disrupting for the sake of the state. He acknowledges her commitment, promising to facilitate the meeting while noting the immediate necessity of suppressing the news of the hero's defeat, a secret that must be kept to maintain the fragile social order and prevent the man from gaining unwanted notoriety. She demands to be taken to him immediately, her resolve hardening as she vows to convince him, prompting a final, stern warning from the general that failure is not an option and they expect results. Far from the cold stone of the prison, the sun shines brightly on a grand estate in the Republic of Shanoa, the residence of Satella, where a very different kind of preparation is underway. Inside the training hall, the instructor announces that the preliminary lessons have concluded and it is time to advance to the second, more rigorous stage of their curriculum. He explains that they are shifting from theory to the brutal reality of hand-to-hand combat, a prospect that leaves his student wide-eyed and questioning if she is truly expected to strike another person in such a pragmatic fashion. He clarifies that their true testing ground will be a dungeon, where she can apply her techniques against monsters. He reveals he has already handled the bureaucratic hurdles by registering her through a proxy, bypassing the usual requirements for adventurers. He reflects on his new life, noting that his position as an instructor has granted him a level of public trust and legitimacy that was entirely out of reach during his days of wandering and unemployment. As they set out, he asks if she has any concept of what awaits them within a dungeon's depths, and upon hearing she has studied the theory in books, he offers a sharp, confident smile, satisfied that they are ready to begin the real work. He leads the way to the mysterious caverns that dot the globe, places where many seek their fortune by braving the monsters within to claim the treasures they guard. This particular site is a private dungeon, a controlled environment teeming specifically with skeleton warriors rather than the diverse and unpredictable menagerie found in wilder depths. Arriving at the imposing stone gateway, the instructor announces their arrival at the training ground, the heavy architecture looming over them. As they walk through the sun-dappled woods toward the entrance, the young princess admits her trepidation about her first real adventure, noting the eerie absence of other adventurers, which her mentor attributes to the exclusive nature of the grounds. He senses her anxiety and offers a calming word, reminding her that this E-ranked location is perfectly suited for a novice, a fact that brings a small measure of comfort to her face. Stepping into the cold, stone-walled corridor, they are immediately met by a rattling pile of bones that knits itself into a warrior, and the instructor designates it as her first true test. The clatter of bone on stone prompts her to ask if such creatures can harness ki, to which he responds that humanoid monsters often do, gauging this particular foe's strength as roughly equal to her own. She stares at the hollow-eyed guardian, questioning her own capability to defeat it, but he cuts through her doubt, warning that hesitation is the only true path to failure against an opponent with such predictable movements. Stealing her resolve, she suddenly lunges forward, her boots echoing against the masonry as she closes the distance with surprising speed. The undead sentry reacts, its rusted blade whistling through the air in a wide arc, but she remains focused, readying her own response as the first blow of the duel is struck. She lunges forward, her fist connecting with the skeleton's skull with a dull thud that echoes through the chamber. Following the initial strike, she delivers a powerful kick that shatters the undead creature's ribcage and skull into brittle fragments. Standing over the pile of bones, she breathes a sigh of relief, declaring her victory, while her instructor notes her lack of hesitation during the kill. He admits her intensity is somewhat frightening, but she playfully counters that her motivation came from imagining the monster was actually him. As they descend further into the cavern, he emphasizes that her ability to act instinctively is the most important takeaway from the encounter, urging her toward the next challenge. Suddenly, she stops, her eyes widening as she feels a surge of energy, realizing her internal ki has grown stronger through the combat. He clarifies that this growth is a natural result of combat, a fact well known to seasoned adventurers, though it feels like a revelation to her. They continue through the subsequent levels, where she efficiently dispatches more sentries while he explains that this rapid growth is only possible because her initial ki levels were so low, much to her playful annoyance. Upon reaching the final floor, she reflects on how much easier the journey has been than she initially anticipated, feeling a sense of accomplishment. However, he quickly dampens her confidence, warning that a specific, dangerous entity resides on this level and she must remain vigilant. He begins to explain the hierarchy of power within the dungeon, noting that a skeleton captain possesses triple the ki of a standard warrior. Furthermore, he warns that the orc she is destined to face next month is 10 times more powerful than even a captain. Hearing this, she realizes the gravity of her situation, understanding that any struggle against the current foes means she stands no chance in her upcoming match. Suddenly, a new presence emerges from the shadows, a skeletal figure adorned with a jagged crown and wreathed in an ethereal glow. The young princess asks if this is the skeleton captain he mentioned, but he quickly dismisses the idea with a firm negative. He identifies the creature as a skeleton general, a high-ranking monster rarely seen outside of deep dungeons, and concludes that the only explanation for its presence is that it has somehow evolved. When she questions how such a thing is possible, he explains that monsters, much like humans, can increase their ki by defeating other creatures. He elaborates that once a monster reaches a specific threshold of ki, they undergo an evolution that raises their rank, though such an occurrence is rare due to the minimal gains they usually receive. The instructor ponders the anomaly, noting that monsters typically live among equals, making it difficult to win consistently. He suspects artificial intervention while calculating that this general has 5 times her current ki, yet remains weaker than the orc. She comes to a stark realization. If she hopes to overcome her rival, she must first prove her strength by defeating this skeleton general. With a determined nod, she prepares to engage the undead commander while he steps back, agreeing to observe her progress. She stood her ground within the dimly lit cavern, her silhouette sharp against the uneven stone as she faced the crowned monstrosity. With a voice that did not waver, she issued a direct challenge, shouting for the creature to come and face her, signaling the start of a confrontation she had chosen for herself to prove her growth. The massive, armored form of a skeleton general looms over the pair, its presence casting a long, chilling shadow across the rocky ground. Teach and Alice stand their ground, dwarfed by the undead warrior's stature. Its hollow eye sockets flicker with an eerie, spectral light, and a ghostly mist clings to its bleached bones, signaling the dark power animating the ancient remains. She suddenly breaks into a dash, the rattle of the skeleton's armor echoing as she closes the distance. Teach calls out a warning, noting the creature's formidable ki, but she dismisses his concern, insisting she is well aware of the danger. He continues to shout instructions, urging her to prioritize evasion above all else as she weaves through the air. Because of his warning, she narrowly avoids a sweeping strike, the air whistling as the skeleton's weapon passes just inches from her. She clenches her fist, her expression hardening with resolve as she tells him once more that his repetitions are unnecessary. With a sudden burst of speed, she lunges forward and delivers a sharp blow against the armored foe, the impact ringing out with a dull thud. He watches her closely, his eyes narrowing as he realizes that mere evasion will not be enough to overcome such an opponent. As she continues her desperate struggle, the disparity in their power becomes clear. The skeleton general possesses a far greater reservoir of ki, allowing its movements to outpace her own despite her best efforts. She is struck with a sickening thud, the force of the skeleton general's blow overwhelming her defenses. The impact sends her reeling backward across the stone floor, followed by the gruesome sound of bone snapping as her arm gives way under the pressure. Collapsing to the ground, she looks up at her mentor with a pained expression, realizing her arm is now useless and dangling at an unnatural angle. He stands over her, acknowledging the severity of the direct hit she just endured. He immediately begins to channel healing magic, his hands glowing as he works to knit the bone back together. He warns her that while the adrenaline masks the agony now, the true pain will set in once the rush fades, but she remains stoic, insisting she can endure it. Once the limb is mended, he steps back, noting that the immediate damage is gone even if the ache remains. He encourages her to return to the fray and claim her revenge, and she stands, her resolve unshaken despite the lingering discomfort. With a sharp command to take down the undead warrior, he watches as she launches herself back into the fight with renewed vigor. She closes the distance instantly, delivering a series of rapid, powerful strikes and kicks against the armored frame of the skeleton general. Despite her fierce assault, she is clearly reaching her limit, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the physical toll of the battle begins to weigh heavily on her. Observing from the sidelines, he concludes that she has finally met the necessary threshold for this trial. With a calm, decisive look, he realizes it is time to bring the encounter to a close. He steps forward, placing himself between his student and the monster, and firmly tells her to stand back. She hesitates, caught off guard by his sudden intervention, just as she was prepared to continue. He looks down at the girl, his gaze sharp and unwavering, and tells her she has done enough, commanding her to step aside. Stepping forward with a heavy thud, he declares his intention to demonstrate how the right tactics can bridge the gap between power levels. A white, flickering aura begins to radiate from his body as he explains that with the right approach, one can overcome an adversary 5 times their strength. The armored, undead monstrosity reacts, its hollow sockets fixed on the new challenger. With a sudden, explosive movement, he drives his foot into the skeleton's ribcage, the impact echoing with a dull crack. The young girl watches in stunned silence as the massive creature's frame groans under the force of the blow. Standing calmly before the reeling monster, he continues his lesson, explaining that concentrating one's energy into a single point allows for strikes that can pierce even the toughest defenses. As the skeleton struggles to regain its footing, he points out that for an agile fighter, the first priority must be to strip away the enemy's mobility. He further elaborates that by disabling a single limb, the number of potential angles an opponent can attack from is significantly reduced, making the battle far more manageable. When the creature lunges again in a desperate counterattack, he effortlessly weaves through the air, his movements a blur as he repositions himself behind the lumbering giant. He stares down the undead monstrosity, his voice cold as he declares the end of the confrontation. With a sudden, explosive movement, he drives his fist into the creature's skull, the impact echoing through the chamber as bone shatters. As the remains of the general collapse into a heap of lifeless bone, the young girl watches in awe, though her mentor quickly reminds her that she must soon be capable of defeating even greater foes. While they depart the training area, he notes her proficiency with healing magic and inquires about her other mystical talents, prompting a humble promise from her to do her best. He continues his lecture, explaining that magic's utility extends far beyond simple spells, encompassing everything from tactical blinding to complex illusions and disguises. Walking through the stone halls, she questions the true flexibility of such arts, to which he responds that mastering multiple disciplines is the key to survival. Their conversation is interrupted by the sight of a familiar, regal figure walking with purpose through the corridor. Observing the woman from a distance, he muses that the principal might be seeking a moment of physical exertion, while his companion expresses surprise at the administrator's presence in the training grounds. Seizing the moment for a practical demonstration, he tells the girl he will show her the true power of shape-shifting, his form beginning to shimmer and shift. Moments later, he stands before her as a perfect double of his own sister, leaving the girl speechless as he reveals his plan to use the disguise for a bit of mischief. He was walking through the rocky terrain when a sudden tap on the shoulder made him whirl around in surprise, his heart racing. Staring back at the unexpected intruder, the disguised youth felt a surge of panic as the stranger questioned how he could possibly be there. Realizing the ruse was unnecessary, he let the magical illusion dissolve with a soft hiss, revealing his true form to the man standing before him. He exhaled a breath of relief, chiding the newcomer for giving him such a fright. The man, Nicola, seemed taken aback by the familiar nickname used, noting that it had been ages since he last set foot in this dungeon. He questioned the necessity of the young man's presence, wondering what could have brought him back to this place after so long. With a sheepish grin, the young master admitted that the old childhood name had simply slipped off his tongue out of habit. He quickly turned the question back on his old acquaintance, curious about the man's own reasons for being in the area. As they spoke, he gestured toward the young girl approaching them, introducing Alice as his disciple. He explained that he had brought her along to this dangerous environment specifically to further her training and test her limits. Nicola watched the girl closely, acknowledging the logic of practicing martial arts against monsters to build a foundation. However, he voiced a lingering concern about whether she would be able to translate those skills into combat against human opponents when the time came, as fighting people required a different mindset. The veteran warrior conceded that while such instruction was technically his responsibility, he was content to let his former pupil handle it for now. He even suggested a more practical test, mentioning that some of his less savory acquaintances might know of bandits in the area who were in need of a harsh lesson. Deciding it was time to conclude their chance meeting, the young man announced his departure. His old friend offered a simple farewell as they prepared to go their separate ways, the brief reunion coming to an end. The vast, rugged mountain range stretched out under a clear sky, falling silent once more as the travelers moved on toward their next destination. The journey leads to a secluded, two-story wooden building nestled quietly among the dense trees of the forest. Approaching the counter inside, the young man calls out for Master Nicola, who emerges from the back room with a look of surprise and recognition. The former bandit greets them warmly, explaining that since his hideout was destroyed, he has had a change of heart and abandoned his life of crime. When the young girl asks for clarification, her mentor bluntly confirms the man's history as an outlaw. He chuckles at the irony, admitting that selling information about his former associates to the knights and guards is far more profitable than his previous life. He explains that the authorities are always willing to pay well for such intelligence. The swordsman cuts through the small talk, asking if there have been any particularly vile groups active in the area lately. The informant lists several threats, but focuses on a specific band of outlaws notorious for their involvement in the slave trade. Upon hearing that this group has been trafficking elven slaves, the young man demands their current location. The informant hesitates, noting that such specific intelligence will cost 5 gold coins, while the young girl listens with a look of growing concern. Without a word, he slides the required payment across the wooden surface, prompting the informant to promise a full disclosure of every detail. The trail leads toward the coast, where ships dock at a quiet pier under the light of a clear sky, marking the territory where the bandits operate. As they prepare to leave the outpost, the informant warns them to be cautious, noting that the group consists of about 10 formidable fighters who won't be easily defeated. He turns to his disciple, explaining that this mission is intended for her to gain practical experience in real combat against human opponents. He stresses 2 vital tactics for the upcoming encounter, prioritizing locks and grappling maneuvers to neutralize their foes. He continues his lecture, stressing the importance of limiting an opponent's offensive capabilities. He explains that while striking a physically superior foe is risky, mastering joint locks and bone-breaking techniques provides a much safer path to victory. She absorbs the lesson, her gaze steady as she commits to the strategy. With a firm nod, she promises to execute the grappling techniques the moment she finds an opening. Outside, the silent facade of a stone building masks the illicit activities within. Moving with practiced stealth, the pair slips through a rear entrance. He scans the dimly lit interior, his mind already calculating the most likely locations for a hidden lair. He moves cautiously between the rows of massive wooden barrels, his senses heightened for any sign of movement in the cluttered room. After a brief search, he shoves aside a heavy barrel to reveal a concealed wooden hatch in the floor. He remarks that once you understand the mindset of a bandit, their attempts at secrecy become painfully transparent. They descend into the gloom, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the cold stone of the narrow staircase. With a sudden, violent kick, he bursts through the door at the bottom. The bandits inside jump to their feet in alarm, their illicit gathering interrupted by the unexpected intruders. Among the captives huddled in the corner, the young dark elf boy looks up, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning hope. They are met with the furious shouts of the bandits, who demand to know who has dared to intrude. He remains unfazed, looking upon the bound captives and declaring that their lineage is irrelevant. They are people of his land, and he will not stand by while they are mistreated. He immediately takes command, directing Alice to focus on the bald leader while he handles the rest of the thugs. A bandit lunges forward with a shout, but the swordsman remains unfazed, already calculating the most efficient way to clear the room. With a series of swift, calculated strikes, he drops the first two attackers before they can even register his movement. Alice stands ready, observing his clinical efficiency as the sounds of the brief scuffle echo through the stone basement. The remaining thugs are silenced in a flurry of impacts, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the dull thud of bodies hitting the floor. Alice watches the display of power, her own resolve hardening for the task she has been assigned. Surveying the room, he notes that the path is clear, leaving only the bald leader standing. He assures Alice that they won't be interrupted, intentionally creating a controlled environment for her to test her skills against a live opponent. The bandit leader, realizing he is being used as a mere training tool, sneers at the arrangement. He proposes a wager, asking if he will be allowed to go free if he manages to defeat the girl, a deal that is met with a cold, indifferent acceptance. Stepping forward, she warns the man to uphold his end of the bargain. The two square off in the center of the room, the air thick with tension as the final confrontation of this training exercise begins. He attempts to intimidate her, boasting that his ki is 3 times greater than hers and demanding her immediate surrender. As he reaches out to seize her, he completely underestimates the speed and technical precision of the young girl before him. In a blur of motion, she executes a perfect joint lock, and the sickening crack of bone echoing through the basement signals the end of the exchange. The bandit's arrogance is instantly replaced by a scream of pure agony as his arm is shattered. He collapses to the ground, clutching his ruined limb and howling in pain. She stands over him, her expression neutral and composed, having neutralized the threat with the exact technique she had been practicing. Despite the debilitating injury, the man snarls a curse at her, his face contorted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. She remains focused, her stance unwavering as she prepares to conclude the encounter. She stands beside her mentor, reflecting on the violence she just committed. Teach offers a word of approval, noting her lack of hesitation, which surprises even her as she contemplates her own capacity for ruthlessness. Moving toward the cages, she checks on the welfare of the young captive, her voice soft with concern. Teach, however, remains pragmatic, reminding her that such severity was necessary to ensure the bandits truly understood the consequences of their crimes and to prevent them from returning to a life of villainy. The young dark elf boy responds not with gratitude, but with a sharp, teeth-gritting glare. He demands to know if she is indeed the high elf princess, and when she confirms her identity, the air between them grows thick with tension. He recoils in disgust, his voice dripping with venom as he declares that death would be preferable to receiving aid from her. The rejection hits her like a physical blow, leaving her wide-eyed and speechless. As the silence stretches, she can only stare at the boy, her expression a mask of hurt and confusion. The boy's rage boils over into a historical indictment, shouting that his people will never forgive the High Elves for the theft of their lands and the subsequent enslavement of his kin. He speaks of Colm, the chieftain of the Dark Elves, who he believes will one day reclaim what was lost. He continues his tirade, boasting that Colm is currently honing his strength under a powerful master. He mentions a sister, a once-in-a-generation genius who has gone missing, as proof of his people's superior potential. She bows her head, the weight of his words and her own perceived inadequacies crushing her spirit. She quietly admits to being a failure to her royal bloodline, which only prompts the boy to sneer that a weak monarchy like hers is incapable of restoring their nation's former glory. Suddenly, the heavy atmosphere is shattered when Teach delivers a sharp, disciplinary knock to the boy's head. The captive yelps in pain and confusion, while Teach coldly suggests that perhaps they should simply leave him to rot in his cage if he finds their help so offensive. The boy's bravado vanishes, replaced by sheer terror as he looks up at the man. Teach leans in with a terrifying, predatory smile, mockingly questioning if he should just cut out the middleman and sell the boy into slavery himself. He leaned in, his voice a low, dangerous rumble as he suggested that certain noble perverts would pay a high price for a dark elf. The captive boy recoiled in terror, a sharp cry escaping him as the man punctuated his threat with a heavy stomp that echoed through the stone room. Because the boy remained defiant, he continued his cold lecture, insisting that ungrateful scum required harsh lessons to prevent them from remaining lowlives forever. However, Alice stepped forward, her voice calm but firm as she commanded him to stop, her expression devoid of the sadness one might expect. She watched as he stepped back with a grunt, leaving the dark elf boy staring up in wide-eyed disbelief. Alice didn't flinch from the boy's gaze, openly acknowledging the dark history where high elves were indeed complicit in the enslavement of his people. Building on this grim admission, she explained that this historical injustice was the exact reason she felt compelled to help, refusing to deny the painful truth behind the boy's accusations. Despite her sincerity, the boy lashed out, claiming he didn't want her help and mocking the man's victory as a mere fluke of a distracted guard. Alice remained unfazed by his outburst, stating coldly that her desire to save the Dark Elves was driven by her own selfish motivations rather than simple pity. With a sudden fire in her eyes, she declared her intent to grow stronger, viewing the salvation of his people as a necessary step in protecting her own country. This declaration left the boy speechless, his aggressive facade crumbling into a look of stunned contemplation as he watched her. Later that evening, the sound of waves lapping against the shore filled the air as the moon hung low over a quiet pier. Alice turned to her mentor, asking if they could pause their rigorous training for a time. She reiterated her vow to become stronger, promising to return before the start of the upcoming tournament. He questioned her plans, noting that while he had imparted the fundamentals of his knowledge, her sudden departure was unexpected. Without another word, she focused her will, manifesting a glowing magical circle that hummed with power. Calling out to her father, she prepared to depart, leaving the man standing alone on the moonlit beach. She makes a direct plea, her voice steady as she requests permission to enter the dungeons. Her focus is specific. She seeks the depths where the skeleton generals are known to reside. The journey leads to the imposing stone entrance of a new dungeon, its arched gateway promising both danger and opportunity. Inside, the silence is broken only by the dry clatter of bones as the remains of a fallen foe scatter across the cold floor. The young girl moves through the dim corridors, her breath coming in heavy, rhythmic huffs as she pushes herself forward. She is driven by a singular, burning thought, the absolute necessity of becoming stronger. Since parting ways with Nicola, she has traversed countless lands, her life a cycle of conquering dungeons and setting up lonely camps under the stars when the day's journey proved too long. Weeks of this grueling routine pass, leading her deeper into the labyrinthine depths of yet another ancient structure. Suddenly, she freezes as a familiar, rattling presence emerges from the shadows ahead. A massive skeleton general, clad in tattered remnants of armor, blocks her path. Recognizing the creature, she lunges forward with a determined cry, labeling the undead warrior as her true nemesis. With a powerful swing, she connects, the impact of her weapon shattering the creature's defenses and sending bone fragments flying through the air. Standing over the pile of inert bones, she offers a grim congratulations to her fallen foe, noting with a sense of practiced ease that it was the 100th of its kind she has laid to rest. She stares down at the hollow sockets of the fallen foe, the finality of the moment hanging in the air. With a decisive swing, she shatters the bone into fragments, declaring that this is the end for the creature. As the dust settles, she looks down at the scattered remains, realizing that her training is far from over. She gathers her belongings, her resolve unshaken despite the mounting exhaustion. Moving deeper into the structure, she reaches the lowest floor of the dungeon, a vast, silent hall lined with towering stone pillars. Her progress is halted by the sound of combat echoing through the chamber. Peering into the distance, she spots another figure engaged in a fierce struggle and wonders who else could be this deep in the ruins. The stranger, a woman with long, dark hair, moves with lethal grace, her blade carving through the skeletal guards with practiced ease. Every strike is precise, every movement calculated. Observing the display of skill, she hesitates, concluding that the warrior is more than capable of handling the situation without any assistance. However, the situation changes in an instant as a hidden skeleton lunges from the shadows toward the woman's blind spot. She cries out a warning and sprints forward to intervene. Before she can reach the fray, the dark-haired warrior senses the threat, spinning with incredible speed to cleave the attacker in two. Approaching the skilled fighter, she breathes a sigh of relief at the narrow escape. The woman turns to her, offering thanks for the warning and asking for her name, while she reflects on how close the call truly was. She introduces herself as a rookie adventurer named Alice, while the warrior she just helped identifies herself as Jessica, acknowledging a debt of gratitude for the timely intervention. The warrior dismisses the monster's ambush as a cowardly act, reassuring her new companion not to worry about the encounter as they walk together through the dungeon's corridors. As the tension of the fight fades, she asks Alice what brought her to such a dangerous place, only to hear that the young girl is there to train and grow stronger, a goal that seems to give the warrior pause. Hearing this, the girl expresses her admiration for the warrior's skill, which Jessica admits is a primary goal of her own journey as she continues to hone her craft. A sudden thought strikes her, and she asks if this skilled fighter is the legendary Jessica from the Sai's Kingdom, a name known for great prowess. The warrior quickly denies the grand title, claiming to be just another Jessica, and insists on showing her gratitude by inviting the girl to her mother's nearby home for a meal to recover their strength. Yielding to the invitation, they approach a modest, well-kept house as the evening light begins to settle over the landscape. They reach the stone path leading to the entrance, the quiet of the surroundings a sharp contrast to the chaos of the dungeon they left behind. Before entering, the warrior asks her guest to wait a moment while she speaks with her mother, promising that the food prepared inside is exceptional and worth the wait. With a familiar click of the latch, she steps through the door and calls out, announcing her return home. She stepped through the doorway, greeted by the rattling of the latch and the stunned gasp of her mother. The older woman stared in disbelief, her eyes wide as she questioned if the figure before her was truly her daughter. Apologizing for her long absence, she embraced her mother, who was overwhelmed with relief and curiosity about where she had been all this time. With a warm smile, she confirmed that she had indeed returned home. She then produced a collection of souvenirs, her thoughts turning to her younger sister, Maria. Her mother explained that Maria had grown up and was currently away at school in the capital, leaving the house quiet in her absence. She offered the treasures to her mother, concerned for their well-being, but the older woman gently pushed her hand away. Insisting that their lives had improved significantly, her mother refused the financial aid, much to her surprise. She felt a shadow of doubt cross her face as she pressed for the truth, asking if they had truly struggled during her long years of absence. Her mother's expression darkened as she recounted the harrowing times when they lacked food and medicine, nearly driven to the brink of selling themselves just to survive until a savior appeared. She spoke the name of their benefactor with pure joy, identifying him as Nicola. Hearing that name, the young warrior froze, her eyes narrowing in a mix of shock and dawning horror. Hearing that name, the young warrior remained silent as her mother continued to praise the man, explaining how he had provided the funds for Maria's education and enough for them to live comfortably. She then looked her mother in the eye and asked a terrifying question. How would she feel if she knew her daughter had tried to take Nicola's life? Her mother was stunned into a frantic silence, grabbing her daughter's shoulders and demanding an immediate explanation for such a shocking confession. She sits across from her daughter in the heavy silence of their modest home, the weight of the confession hanging between them like a shroud. Her face contorts in a mask of pure disbelief, a trembling hand rising to her lips as she gasps out a question, unable to fathom how her own flesh and blood could commit such a betrayal. Jessica can only offer a weak, stuttering denial, her gaze fixed firmly on the floor. The shock quickly curdles into a sharp, biting anger as she berates her daughter for such monumental ingratitude, reminding her that their very survival is owed to the man she tried to kill. Jessica's voice is small and hollow as she admits that the weight of her regret has become an unbearable burden. She continues her verbal assault, revealing that Nicola's charity began long before Jessica ever realized, supporting the family even during her long absences. The revelation hits the young warrior like a physical blow, her eyes widening as the foundation of her hatred begins to crumble under the weight of the truth. To drive the point home, she recounts the desperate days of Jessica's childhood, when she was forced to beg for scraps on the street until Nicola offered her a position in his family's manor, saving them from certain starvation. The most harrowing truth follows. She confesses that without Nicola's intervention, she would have been forced to sell Jessica into slavery just to keep the rest of the family alive. Jessica stares back, her pupils dilated in sheer terror at the life she narrowly escaped. As the young woman tries to claim her success as a swordsman was due to her own merit, her mother scathingly corrects her, explaining that every scrap of food, every piece of clothing, and even the very instructor who trained her were all paid for by Nicola's hidden hand. He had kept his involvement a secret to avoid tainting their friendship with the burden of debt. Overcome with fury, she lunges across the table and seizes Jessica, her grip tight and unforgiving as she dismisses Jessica's claims of being a knight's disciple as nothing more than a delusional lie. She drags her daughter toward the entrance, her voice booming with a final, heart-wrenching decree that she will not harbor an ungrateful child under her roof. With a final shove, she commands Jessica to leave and never return. The heavy wooden gate slams shut with a definitive thud, leaving the disgraced warrior standing in the dust of the street while her companions watch on in stunned silence. She stands frozen as her mother's voice reaches a fever pitch of cruelty, the older woman screaming that she wished she had sold her daughter into slavery as an infant. The physical rejection is just as sharp as the verbal one, as her mother roughly grabs her, forcing her out of the only home she has ever known. Stumbling out into the world she no longer belongs to, she is met by the concerned gaze of Alice, who immediately senses the devastation written across her face. Alice reaches out, her voice soft as she asks what could have possibly happened to leave her in such a state of shock. The silence between them is heavy, punctuated only by the soft sound of footsteps as Alice moves closer, refusing to let her friend face this despair alone. As they stand together, Alice listens to the fragments of the story, her heart aching for the girl who has lost everything. She acknowledges the sheer weight of the ordeal, offering the only comfort she can by validating the immense difficulty of the situation. The dam finally breaks, and she collapses into a fit of raw, agonizing sobs, the words pouring out of her alongside the tears. She laments the loss of her home, her friends, her very identity, and the pride she once held as a swordsman, feeling utterly hollowed out and abandoned. Seeing her friends so broken, Alice pulls her close, offering a steady presence as the distraught girl berates herself for her own perceived foolishness, wondering how she could have been so blind to the truth. In the quiet intimacy of the moment, Alice watches her with a look of profound empathy, witnessing the total collapse of the once regal woman's composure. Time passes, and the personal tragedy is eclipsed by the arrival of a major event, the day of the tournament. The grand architecture of the arena stands ready for the coming trials. Inside the quiet halls, Teach is interrupted from his thoughts by a familiar voice calling his name. He turns, surprised to find a visitor after what feels like an eternity of isolation. It is Alice who stands before him, her appearance subtly altered and her presence more commanding than before. She smiles, noting with a keen eye that he, too, has undergone a significant transformation in the brief time they were apart. She sits across from him, curious about the journey he has just completed. He admits that clearing dungeons left and right was no easy feat, but he persevered through the grueling trials to make it back. Seeing the weight of his experiences, she acknowledges the hardship he must have endured. However, she quickly shifts to her own accomplishments, proudly boasting about defeating 100 skeleton generals during her own time away. Her tone softens as she recounts the grittier details of her survival, mentioning how she was forced to consume the very monsters she hunted when supplies ran low. She recalls the early days when the skeletal warriors frequently overpowered her, leaving her battered and bruised. A tight grip on her skirt betrays the lingering memory of those struggles, yet she finds a grim pride in having learned how to properly prepare her monstrous prey. He listens in stunned silence, a bead of sweat rolling down his face as he imagines the culinary horrors she describes, while the memory of his own mentor flickers in his mind. Despite the hardships, a radiant smile breaks across her face. She declares with newfound confidence that she has grown stronger, finally able to stand tall and face the world with her head held high. The conversation shifts as he presents a notice for her upcoming match scheduled for that evening, expressing his genuine anticipation. She matches his enthusiasm, mentioning a new friend she made during her travels whom she hopes to introduce soon. His expression turns grave as he brings the focus back to the impending challenge, warning her that the opponent she faces, a formidable girl often called an orc, possesses a physical strength far beyond her own. He reveals that he has already spent time gathering intelligence on her rival to prepare for what lies ahead. He explains that while her physical conditioning is impressive, the true disparity lies in their spiritual energy. A mental comparison shows that while she has grown, her opponent's ki burns 5 times brighter, presenting a massive hurdle for the upcoming bout. He refuses to let her despair, insisting that victory is still within reach if she masters the precise management of her ki and relies on her agility and close-quarters combat skills. She listens intently, her eyes wide with the realization that she still has a fighting chance despite the odds. He poses the ultimate question, his gaze piercing as he asks if she truly believes she can overcome such a powerful foe. She falls into a contemplative silence, the weight of the challenge ahead finally settling upon her shoulders. She declares her resolve with a bright, confident smile, reminding herself that she is the warrior who once vanquished 100 skeleton generals single-handedly. Seeing this fire in her eyes, her mentor offers a small, knowing smirk, acknowledging that she finally has the right spirit for the coming trial. He taps a finger against his notes to emphasize his next point, warning her that this opponent is sentient and far more dangerous than mindless undead. She must ensure not a single punch connects. The young girl absorbs this, recalling how her foe left a massive crater in the arena during a previous bout, and realizes that every scrap of information will be vital. Her teacher observes that she has truly adopted the cautious, calculating mindset of a pragmatic martial artist, a compliment she deflects by crediting his own expert tutelage. As the massive stone walls of the arena loom overhead, her internal resolve hardens into a singular, unwavering goal. She will absolutely defeat the one they call the orc. Nearby, the spectators are already buzzing with doubt, whispering that while they might hope for her victory, she stands little chance against such a monstrous opponent. Amidst the growing chatter, the dark-skinned girl known as the orc remains silent and focused, her expression unreadable as she prepares for the confrontation. The man looks out at the stands, surprised to see that her classmates from the 9th class have actually come to offer their support despite the odds. She explains with a mischievous glint in her eye that while Iris was strongly opposed to the idea, the bodyguards simply couldn't find a way to refuse her mistress's whims. She listens intently as her mentor explains the high stakes for her opponent. Apparently, Iris's very quality of life and a future class trip depend on the outcome of this match. With the weight of the situation clear, he gives her the final signal to proceed according to their strategy, and she acknowledges him with a quiet, resolute confirmation. Stepping out into the blinding light of the arena, the young girl is met with a thunderous roar from the spectators, her expression hardening as she prepares for the trial ahead. From a distance, the two combatants appear as small figures on the vast, stone stage, the cheers of the crowd echoing through the massive stadium. Her opponent, the dark elf Iris, greets her with a mocking grin, remarking that she hasn't changed a bit in the months they've been apart. Ignoring the taunt, she focuses inward, noting with satisfaction that she has successfully managed to suppress her internal energy, keeping her true strength hidden from her adversary. Iris scans the sidelines, loudly demanding to know the whereabouts of the cowardly teacher, while the girl simply observes that her mentor is indeed running behind schedule. Nearby, Master Nicholas seethes with indignation, recalling how his teaching methods were mocked and vowing to force an apology once his student secures a victory. The tension is interrupted as the principal is called upon to preside over the match, looking down from her high balcony as she prepares to formalize the proceedings. Her voice carries across the arena, declaring that the combatants are free to utilize any magic or weaponry at their disposal, signaling the true beginning of the duel. She stands poised on the stone stage, the center of attention as the final terms are laid out. The principal's voice carries through the air, decreeing that the struggle will persist until a surrender is voiced or one of them is physically broken and unable to carry on, emphasizing that they are free to use any means they see fit. Standing within the stone walls of the arena, the dark elf girl barks a command for the duel to begin, her eyes locked onto her opponent. Immediately, she unleashes a torrent of dark energy, the sheer force of her ki swirling around her like a violent storm. She watches with a cruel smirk as the light-haired girl across from her flares with her own aura, the two powers crackling in the tense air between them. The dark elf taunts her foe, questioning if the overwhelming pressure of her spirit has rendered the girl unable to move. With a predatory glint in her eyes, she leans in close, promising that while she will spare the girl's life, the pain she is about to inflict will be beyond anything she has ever known. Alice remains remarkably composed, meeting the threat with a calm gaze and asking if such arrogance is truly wise given the circumstances. She then raises a hand, pointing past her aggressor and telling her to look at what has appeared behind her. The dark elf scoffs at the suggestion, dismissing it as a cowardly trick taught by a pathetic teacher, refusing to fall for such a blatant distraction. However, a sudden, icy chill grips her heart as a massive, dark silhouette emerges from the shadows of the doorway, his mere presence causing her entire body to shudder in primal fear. He stands there, a silent specter of authority, as Iris whips around in sheer disbelief. Her eyes widen and her breath hitches at the sudden, terrifying realization of his presence in the arena. The man remains impassive, his gaze heavy and unyielding. His rugged features, marked by a light stubble, betray no emotion, yet the sheer weight of his stare seems to pin his surroundings in place, radiating an aura of absolute control. Taking advantage of the distraction he provides, Alice slips behind the startled dark elf. She leans in close, her voice a cold, steady whisper as she reminds her opponent of the most basic rule of combat. One should never turn their back on an enemy in the middle of a match. She delivers a sharp, precise blow to the side of the girl's neck. The impact is sudden and jarring, catching the warrior completely off guard while her focus remains fractured between the two threats. Seizing the moment of disorientation, the young girl lunges forward. She wraps her arms around her opponent, locking her in a firm, inescapable grip. With a surge of controlled strength, she heaves Iris upward and drives her down into the arena floor. The impact is violent, a heavy thud echoing through the air as the dark elf is slammed ruthlessly against the hard surface, the force of the throw leaving her breathless. Iris hits the ground with a sickening flump, a guttural scream of pain tearing from her throat. The surrounding spectators erupt into a flurry of confused chatter, their voices rising in a wave of shock at the sudden, brutal turn of the match. Gasping for air and clutching her throbbing shoulder, the fallen warrior glares up with pure venom. She spits out the word coward, her voice trembling with rage as she accuses her opponent of relying on nothing but shameful, cheap tricks to gain the upper hand. The victor stands tall and composed over her defeated foe, unmoved by the insults. She calmly explains that as a disciple of her teacher, she views the lack of preparation as the true failure, noting that it was Iris's own fault for not preparing countermeasures despite knowing they weren't afraid to fight dirty. She concludes her lecture by pointing out that the maneuver only succeeded because Iris allowed her guard to drop. On the ground, the dark elf can only grit her teeth in silent, impotent fury, the sting of the defeat compounded by the harsh truth of the lesson. She stands composed while her opponent grinds her teeth in frustration, the realization of defeat finally sinking in. Iris reflects on how she was led by the nose, realizing that Teach's late arrival was a calculated move to throw her off balance with his sheer presence. Standing nearby, the broad-shouldered instructor reminds the defeated girl of the stakes they had agreed upon before the duel began. He brings up the condition regarding a public apology, prompting a sharp, defensive retort from her. He doesn't flinch, stating coldly that since she was the one who lost, the burden of the apology now falls on her. He demands she make amends to every student she has tormented, punctuating his demand with a derogatory label that cuts through her pride. The insult hits home, and her expression twists into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Around the arena, the spectators erupt in a chorus of agreement, their voices rising in a collective chant for justice as they cheer for their princess. Consumed by fury, she screams a death threat at the instructor, her voice cracking with the intensity of her hatred. Nicola remains unimpressed, casually challenging her to put her strength to the test if she truly believes she can back up such a claim. With a sudden, violent surge of energy, she prepares to strike, the air around her whipping into a frenzy. This sudden display of aggression catches Alice off guard, her eyes widening as she senses the shift in the atmosphere. She stands her ground, but the dark-skinned girl is suddenly paralyzed by a new realization as she senses the true depth of the power before her. The sheer intensity of Alice's aura is staggering, far beyond anything Iris had anticipated. Lunging forward with a desperate strike, she screams out her accusation, feeling betrayed by what she perceives as a long-term deception. She claims that the weakness Alice showed months ago was nothing but a ruse to lure her into this very moment of humiliation. She reflects on the past, noting that months ago, the mere pressure of her opponent's ki would have been enough to bring her to her knees. Alice acknowledges this truth, admitting that she was indeed weak 3 months ago. With newfound resolve, the young girl declares that the days of being a protected princess are over. She has embraced her identity as Alice, the martial artist, no longer needing anyone to shield her. This declaration only fuels the dark elf's rage, and she screams a desperate insult through gritted teeth, calling her opponent a coward as she prepares to lash out with everything she has. In the face of this fury, the martial artist remains perfectly still, her gaze sharp and unwavering. The elf lunges forward with a powerful strike, but her target vanishes with a soft whistle of air, leaving her shocked and punching at nothing. As the assault continues, the girl moves with fluid grace, each of the elf's desperate blows missing by a hair's breadth. Frustration sets in as the elf realizes her speed is no match for this calm precision, a single word of realization escaping her lips. She continues her frantic dance, but her opponent is always one step ahead, moving with a speed that defies the eye. Breathless and trembling, the elf stands in the center of the training ground, unable to comprehend why none of her hits will connect. Watching from the sidelines, the master trainer mocks her efforts, questioning what happened to her famous crater-forming punches and suggesting that her reputation might have been nothing more than a rumor. He watched as the dark elf girl's temper finally snapped, her voice cracking as she roared for silence while throwing a desperate, wide punch. She easily sidestepped the wild swing, her movements fluid and controlled compared to the raw, unrefined aggression of her opponent. The dark elf girl lunged again, her face twisted in a mask of pure frustration as she refused to accept the gap in their abilities. She countered with a precise, powerful blow to the midsection, the force of the strike echoing through the training grounds as it connected. The impact left her gasping for air, her legs trembling as she struggled to maintain her footing against the overwhelming pressure. She struggled to catch her breath, sweat dripping from her brow as the agonizing realization of her own helplessness began to sink in. The victor stood calmly, explaining that the reason for her effortless evasion was simple. Her opponent relied solely on her fists, making her movements predictable. She continued her explanation, revealing that she had intentionally chosen not to use her legs for this bout, a revelation that left the dark elf girl speechless with shock. She had prepared for this encounter by studying past matches through a crystal ball, identifying a critical flaw, a complete lack of kicking techniques in her opponent's repertoire. She delivered the final verbal blow, confirming that not a single one of the dark elf's previous victories had involved anything other than punches, exposing her as a one-dimensional fighter. She stands calmly, explaining that despite the devastating power of her opponent's ki, kicking was never the dark elf's strong suit. She had followed a calculated plan. Her mentor had previously noted how unusual it was to goad an enemy into using their strongest moves, yet he had specifically instructed her to provoke those crater-making punches. She elaborates on the manipulation, revealing that they had funneled the warrior into a choice between two paths, the kicks she struggled with or the punches she excelled at, and the results spoke for themselves. Her opponent is struck by the realization like a physical blow, her breath hitching as the depth of the trap is finally laid bare. The victor continues her analysis, admitting that even with the options narrowed, those powerful arms remained a formidable obstacle that nearly proved insurmountable. The dark elf grits her teeth against the throbbing pain in her limb, cursing her own perceived carelessness and convinced that the win was within her grasp. She finally bows her head, uttering the words of surrender that echo through the silent arena. The victor stands amidst the aftermath of her triumph as a roar of approval erupts from the stands, the sudden wall of sound washing over her. She raises a hand to the crowd while the official declaration of her victory rings out, leaving her opponent knelt in the dust of the ring. Far from the cheers of the arena, the sun shines over the peaceful, timber-framed buildings of the town of Shanoa. He waited with a heavy gaze, his patience wearing thin as the minutes ticked by. The realization that she was late only added to his growing irritation. Standing amidst the bustling market of Shanoa, he couldn't help but wonder how he had allowed himself to be dragged into such a situation on a weekend. The idea of a jobless man wandering through a crowded marketplace felt increasingly absurd to him. His internal grumbling was interrupted by the young girl's cheerful presence as she reminded him of her recent victory. She demanded a reward for her triumph, suggesting a day out in town, though he countered by questioning why she would seek financial favors from someone without a steady income. He let out a long, weary sigh, his eyes drifting toward the numerous couples strolling through the square. The sight only reinforced his sense of being out of place in such a romanticized setting. She finally reached him, breathless and offering a hurried apology for the delay. Her face was flushed from the exertion of rushing to meet him. The swordsman didn't let her off easily, noting that it took a certain level of audacity to keep a teacher waiting. She sheepishly explained that the delay was caused by Iris, who had spent a significant amount of time styling her hair. He stared at her in disbelief as she proudly displayed her new hairstyle, which she considered a clever disguise. While she beamed with confidence, asking for his opinion, he bluntly remarked that only a fool would fail to recognize her. Seeing the futility of her efforts, he suggested that she abandon such amateurish disguises in favor of learning actual shape-shifting magic. The suggestion clearly deflated her spirits, as she had placed a surprising amount of faith in her simple change of appearance. She countered his practical advice with a personal conviction, stating her distaste for magic that altered the body her parents had given her. He warned her that such a rigid mindset would only hinder her growth and prevent her from becoming truly powerful. The young girl clarified that while she wouldn't use such magic for trivial deception, she understood its necessity in dire circumstances. Accepting her reasoning, he decided it was time to move on, and they began to discuss their destination for the day. He listens as she beams with excitement, promising to take him to a place she is certain he will appreciate. As they stroll through the picturesque streets of Shanoa, he skeptically wonders aloud if their destination is some sort of bandit hideout, but she playfully refuses to reveal her secret just yet. The town is alive with the constant clamor of citizens going about their daily business, the cobblestone paths crowded with people. Amidst the bustle, they draw unwanted attention, Onlookers whisper about the striking contrast between the powerful, handsome man and the seemingly frail, scrawny girl at his side. These judgmental remarks clearly irritate her, and his imposing presence only seems to fuel the townspeople's suspicion that he might be exploiting the young elf for her wealth. Seeking a distraction from the gossip, she stops at a nearby stall and begins examining various garments, pulling a few items for inspection. She watches him closely as he holds up a pair of simple white tunics, his expression unreadable as he considers the mundane task of shopping. Seeing him engage with the activity brings a burst of joy to her face, and she cheers with renewed energy, though he remains visibly perplexed by her sudden shift in mood. With the shopping concluded, she leads the way once more, declaring that it is finally time for the day's primary objective. She guides him into a secluded, narrow alleyway with a knowing smirk, prompting him to ask what exactly awaits them in the shadows ahead. She leads the way through the labyrinthine stone corridors, her voice echoing with a sense of triumph as she announces that they have finally reached their destination. Emerging from the shadows of the alley, they are greeted by the thunderous roar of a crowd gathered in a sunlit courtyard. She turns to him, explaining that this lively spectacle is a wrestling event fueled by high-stakes betting, the very place she intended to show him. A knowing smirk plays across her features as she continues to walk ahead, leaving him to wonder aloud if there is something even more significant waiting for them further down the path. He follows her back into the narrow confines of the stone walls, where the declaration of their arrival is repeated, marking a transition deeper into the heart of the hidden venue. Once more, the sounds of the cheering throng erupt as they overlook the arena, and she reiterates that this gambling-fueled wrestling match was the specific goal of their journey today. The bustling town square is alive with the roar of a crowd. A wrestling event is underway, drawing spectators from all corners of the city to witness the spectacle of strength and skill. Standing amidst the throng, the young man questions the nature of the reward. A nearby observer explains that the ultimate prize is a rare grimoire, a mystical tome hailing from a distant eastern land. He considers the stakes as the conversation continues. The grimoire's value is estimated at a staggering 100 gold pieces, making the single gold piece entry fee seem like a trivial investment for such a potential windfall. The focus shifts to the center of the arena where the reigning champion, a formidable woman known as Rise, stands tall. Wearing a mask that conceals her identity, she boasts an incredible streak of 98 consecutive victories, having bested opponents far larger than herself. Intrigued by her reputation, he asks if her raw power is truly that overwhelming. His companion clarifies that the event is governed by strict regulations, suggesting that victory depends on more than just brute force. She elaborates on the constraints, noting that key output is standardized to a specific level to ensure that differences in innate strength do not lead to serious injury. Furthermore, direct strikes to the face are strictly prohibited, forcing competitors to rely on grappling and tactical maneuvers. In the heat of the match, the masked warrior moves with predatory grace. She effortlessly evades a lunging strike from her opponent, her movements a blur of controlled speed as she closes the distance. The challenger attempts a desperate high kick, but she is already gone, slipping past his guard. He realizes too late that his attack has left him completely exposed to her counter. Observing the display of mastery, the young man confesses his true intentions. He admits to his companion that the primary reason for their outing today was his desire to study the champion's technique firsthand. He watches as Alice's eyes widen with a sudden realization, her voice soft as she agrees that the technique they are witnessing could be quite useful for their own purposes. In the ring, the masked champion moves with supernatural fluidity, her body a blur as she effortlessly evades a flurry of strikes from her opponent. The man stands baffled, his frustration mounting as he wonders what kind of monster he is facing, unable to land even a single blow. She offers a confident smirk in response to his struggle, while he gasps for air, his mind racing as he finally admits to himself that none of his attacks are finding their mark. Seizing the moment of his hesitation, she closes the distance in an instant, catching him completely off guard. With a powerful, practiced motion, she swings around and secures a firm grip on his arm, the sound of the struggle echoing through the arena. The sound of straining joints fills the air as she locks him into a punishing hold, forcing a cry of agony from the man before he desperately shouts his surrender. Observing from the sidelines, Alice notes the striking similarity between the champion's move and the lessons her mentor provided, a sentiment he confirms while pondering the origin of the woman's skills. He then turns to his student, instructing her to sign up for the next match, ignoring her shocked protest as he insists that facing such a formidable opponent is the ultimate training opportunity. Despite her initial hesitation, she heads toward the registration desk, her resolve hardening as she prepares to step into the ring herself. She stands ready in the arena, facing the masked champion who towers over her with an air of seasoned confidence. As the crowd erupts in cheers, the masked woman calls for a fair and clean match, while the young girl offers a respectful bow in return. She is momentarily caught off guard by a strange whisper from her opponent, who seems to be savoring the moment. The champion suddenly bursts into a fit of manic joy, throwing her head back and exclaiming her excitement at finally facing another female combatant in the ring after so many matches. This unexpected outburst leaves both the young challenger and her mentor in the stands completely stunned. Trembling with visible anticipation and clutching her face, she reveals that this is her 100th match, and she had long wished for a female opponent to mark the milestone. Expressing how much she has yearned for this specific moment, she doubles down on her enthusiasm, correcting herself to say she is absolutely delighted, while the girl can only stare in silent confusion. Turning her attention to the audience with a shout, she loudly laments the lack of variety in her previous matches, complaining that the arena reeks of men and that she has fought nothing but old men and burly warriors until now. She then proposes a bizarre philosophy, suggesting that the best fights occur when two women exchange punches like love letters, and after receiving a hesitant agreement, she declares they should not waste any more time. With a sudden burst of speed, she lunges forward, inviting her opponent to make the first move even as she closes the distance. She lunges forward with a powerful high kick, her long hair trailing behind her as she challenges her opponent to defend herself. Alice remains focused, tracking the incoming strike. Because of this sudden aggression, Alice is forced to react instantly, raising her own leg to intercept the blow with a sharp crack. The masked woman's eyes widen behind her mask, stunned by the speed and precision of the block. The force of the collision sends her reeling backward, her boots scraping against the ground as she struggles to regain her footing. Seizing the opening, the young girl lunges forward, her fist connecting solidly with the champion's midsection in a heavy, muffled thud. The impact sends the masked fighter sliding across the floor, clutching her stomach as she gasps for air. She looks up, her voice strained as she questions if her opponent is actually a trained martial artist. In response, Alice maintains her stance, coolly asking what exactly gave her away. Nearby, Teach watches the exchange with a knowing smirk, amused by the unfolding spectacle. The champion recovers, standing tall as she admits that the block and subsequent counterpunch were executed with superb skill, far beyond the capabilities of a mere amateur. She continues her praise, her expression shifting into a predatory grin as she explains that while she has faced many women before, nothing compares to the thrill of testing herself against a true female martial artist. Hearing this, Alice swallows hard, the weight of the situation and the intensity of her opponent's gaze beginning to press down on her. Sensing the shift in momentum, Teach calls out a warning, advising her to keep her distance and ensure the champion doesn't manage to close the gap again. He had just finished his warning when the masked champion spoke up, acknowledging his role as a mentor. She observed that Alice's previous performance made it clear her strengths lay in grappling, but issued a chilling counter-warning. If she managed to seize the girl, the match would be over. Because of this threat, the young girl began to circle, confirming her mentor's assessment. She understood the stakes. Her only path to victory was to maintain a relentless assault while keeping a safe distance from the champion's reach. With a firm acknowledgement of the plan, she locked eyes with her opponent. The champion merely smiled, a predatory confidence radiating from behind her mask as the tension between them reached a breaking point. Suddenly, the champion lunged forward with explosive speed. The girl braced herself, her eyes tracking the blurred movement as the distance between them vanished in an instant. She met the charge with a flurry of rapid strikes, her fists blurring as they connected with the champion's guard. Despite the speed of the assault, the masked woman remained unfazed, her movements fluid and controlled. Closing the gap further, the champion's grin widened. She whispered a promise of capture, her voice dripping with the certainty of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. In a desperate bid to push her back, the girl launched a powerful high kick. The impact echoed through the arena as the champion blocked the strike with a solid forearm, the sheer force of the collision causing the girl's eyes to widen in realization. The masked woman barely flinched, dismissively noting that such direct attacks against her guard were little more than an annoyance. She was looking for an opening, and the kick had provided exactly what she needed. Before the girl could recover her footing, a hand shot out with blinding speed. The grip was ironclad, snapping shut around her wrist with a finality that signaled a shift in the battle's momentum. He watched in grim silence as the champion's prediction came true. She had Alice firmly in her grasp, the sound of straining fabric and the girl's muffled grunt of pain filling the air as the champion reaffirmed her dominance. He watches as the masked champion tightens her grip, a predatory grin on her face as she declares that the real contest is only just beginning. Because of the crushing pressure, she lets out a pained grunt, her body tensing as a sharp throb of agony radiates through her from the hold. Moments later, the tide begins to turn as the champion feels the delayed impact of Alice's earlier strikes, the throbbing pain in her own limbs finally slowing her down. Seizing the opportunity, the young girl reaches out and secures a firm grip on her opponent's arm, catching the masked woman completely off guard. With a sudden, violent twist, she leverages her weight against the champion's momentum. In response to the reversal, she expertly maneuvers behind her foe, locking her into a restrictive hold that mirrors the one she was just trapped in. The champion cries out in genuine pain, pleading for a gentler touch, but Alice calmly suggests that a surrender would be a much quicker way to end the discomfort. Realizing she is beaten, the masked woman shouts her surrender to the arena, prompting a roar of cheers from the spectators, including the man who had been watching so intently. As they both stand panting and recovering from the exertion, the champion acknowledges the girl's strength, questioning if the man in the crowd was the one who trained her. She reflects on the question, her mind drifting to her true master, a man she compares to the one standing nearby, who is currently far away in elven lands, readying for the coming fires of war. She admits that her father rarely shares important details with her, a revelation that surprises the masked champion. Rise had assumed the elven princess would be fully informed about the brewing conflict, but the young girl's ignorance of her own kingdom's affairs is stark. Dismissing the oversight, the warrior notes that such news would have reached her ears sooner or later regardless. She turns her focus away from the politics of war, her expression softening as she prepares to conclude their encounter. Reaching out, she presents the victor's reward, a heavy, ornate grimoire bound in dark leather and inscribed with a complex magical seal. She offers it with the hope that its contents will prove beneficial to the young princess's journey. The two combatants clasp hands in a gesture of mutual respect, while the surrounding crowd erupts into applause. Rise offers her thanks for the spirited match, a sentiment the girl warmly reciprocates as they part ways. Later, as the sun begins to set over the bustling town, the mentor reflects on the day's events with a sense of satisfaction. The tournament had concluded successfully, and the air is filled with the quiet hum of a peaceful evening. Walking alongside him through the cobblestone streets, the girl listens as he acknowledges her victory over the orc and questions her desire to continue her training. Without a moment's hesitation, she declares her intent to grow even stronger, her resolve unshaken by the day's trials. A radiant smile breaks across her face as she confesses her true motivation. She wishes to become a woman capable of standing as an equal by his side. The depth of her devotion is clear in her bright, hopeful eyes. He gazes back at her, a quiet understanding dawning as he realizes the weight of her words. With a faint, knowing smile, he accepts her reasoning, noting that such a goal indeed requires her to remain under his tutelage. The scene shifts to the tranquil rhythm of the coast, where the white foam of the tide washes over the sandy shore. The sound of the ocean provides a serene backdrop to the changing pace of their journey. Clad in attire suited for the warmth of the beach, the pair stands near the water's edge. The transition from the rigors of combat to this moment of respite marks a new chapter in their shared path. She laughs brightly, enjoying the sun and the sea alongside her new companion. The tension of the tournament has finally given way to a moment of pure, unadulterated joy as they relax on the shore. Watching her from a distance, he sits cross-legged on the sand, a quiet sense of accomplishment washing over him. For the first time, he truly feels like he has stepped into the role of a mentor, guiding his pupil toward her potential. This shift in his life came after a series of administrative changes at the academy. The instructor previously in charge of the first class resigned following Alice's victory, and the long-standing animosity between the different student groups began to thaw after a formal apology was issued. Because of these shifts, he found himself tasked with supervising the first class during this seaside excursion, keeping a watchful eye on the students as they frolic in the waves. His gaze drifts toward the dark elf girl, noting with some amusement how popular she has become among her peers, despite her prickly exterior. While he is lost in thought, the young princess approaches him, her face beaming as she asks for his thoughts on her new beach attire. In the background, her companions tease the dark elf about her slender frame, suggesting she needs more training to catch anyone's eye. Hearing the exchange, the dark elf rushes forward to intervene, warning the princess to keep her distance from the man she still views with suspicion. He, however, simply offers a calm compliment, noting that the swimsuit suits the girl well. She immediately chides her friend, telling her not to be so disrespectful to the man who has taught them so much. The dark elf pauses, the sharp words catching her off guard. Taking a breath, the elf offers a stiff, reluctant apology for her behavior. Though she makes it clear that her personal feelings toward him haven't changed, she still harbors a deep-seated dislike for him. Despite that lingering resentment, she offers a sincere word of thanks for the strength he has helped the princess find. He accepts the gratitude with a simple nod, knowing that their bond, however strained, has grown through their shared trials. He sits on the sand, accepting a rare apology from Iris as she walks away. He dismisses her concerns with a casual wave, his focus remaining on the peaceful horizon. As Iris departs, Jessica joins him, reflecting on their lifelong bond. She reveals a heavy truth. Iris is a survivor of the dark elven royal lineage, a bloodline nearly wiped out during the Great War. He recalls rumors of a missing princess from that era, a connection Alice confirms with a solemn look. The weight of Iris's hidden identity hangs in the air between them. The history of that bloody purge unfolds, revealing that while most were executed, Iris's half-brother Colin was spared due to his mother's pleas for peace. In contrast, Iris's own mother had been a fierce advocate for war, marking the girl for death. It was only through the intervention of Jessica's family, who adopted her and staged her disappearance, that she survived. Despite this tragic history, he questions if Jessica has ever feared a betrayal from her friend. She meets his gaze with unwavering resolve, refusing to even entertain such a thought. Their conversation is abruptly cut short as Jessica's sister arrives, her expression grim. She delivers a sharp warning that shatters the afternoon's tranquility. Beyond the shore, the island's peace is officially broken. Intruders have breached the perimeter, and a new threat looms over the horizon. Iris and Alice stand frozen, their eyes wide with alarm as they witness a sudden blaze. The crackling of the fire reflects in their shocked expressions, signaling an abrupt end to their peace. Across the water, a distant island sits under a vast sky, the silence broken by a sharp, rushing sound. The word of intruders begins to spread, a chilling realization that their sanctuary has been breached. On the shore, Nicola crouches beside Jessica and Alice, his brow furrowed in disbelief. He questions the audacity of anyone who would dare to trespass upon the private grounds of the Shanoa Academy. He presses for more information, wondering what such invaders could possibly seek. Jessica, her gaze cold and focused, identifies the threat as demi-human mercenaries, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, Teach considers the potential motives, his mind turning to the Academy's library. He knows the archive contains a priceless collection of military arts texts from across the globe, a prize worth any risk. Nicola voices the immediate concern of who will safeguard the students during the incursion. Jessica turns to him, tasking him with the defense of the library and its vital knowledge. She then commands him to escort Princess Alice to safety and evacuate immediately. Nicola accepts the order with a firm acknowledgement, while Jessica prepares to face the coming storm alone. As she strides toward the water, Alice looks back, her expression filled with a mix of worry and lingering shock. The sound of the waves masks the growing tension as the group splits to fulfill their duties. The Grand Library stands silent and imposing against the darkening sky, its stone arches hiding the treasures within. It is a bastion of knowledge now turned into a primary target. Inside, Nicholas sits alone on the stone steps, the heavy doors locked behind him. He is plagued by doubt, questioning if it was truly the right decision to leave the safety of the students in the hands of his sister. While the veteran warrior sat alone on the stone steps, the young princess approached him, carrying a tray of food. He welcomed the sight, admitting his hunger as she announced she had brought him dinner. On the tray lay several skewers of grilled fish, their skin charred and glistening. She presented them with a mix of pride and nervousness, hoping the meal she prepared herself would be to his liking. He took a bite, chewing thoughtfully as she watched him with wide, expectant eyes. While she radiated excitement, his internal assessment was more grounded. It was a simple, standard meal, neither exceptional nor disappointing. She continued to speak, explaining that she had recently begun taking cooking lessons. Much like her dedication to the martial arts, she expressed a sincere desire to improve her culinary skills over time, even if grilling was her current limit. Her expression then turned serious as she observed him, noting that the more she learned, the more she realized the depth of his power. She finally voiced the question that had been on her mind. What had driven him to become so incredibly strong? He paused, a shadow crossing his features as he looked away. His voice was low as he admitted that his pursuit of strength was born from a need to overcome a specific, painful trauma from his past. The memory surfaced of a time when he had been part of a team, only to be abandoned. He believed that had he possessed greater power back then, his allies would never have betrayed him, a conviction that had fueled his solitary training ever since. This desire for absolute self-reliance was his ultimate goal. He explained that by becoming the strongest, he would never have to face defeat again, ensuring that no one would ever have the opportunity to turn their back on him. She listened intently before offering a warm, reassuring smile. In her eyes, he had already achieved a level of strength that surpassed even the legendary heroes of old, a sentiment that brought a rare, genuine smile to his face. As the evening drew to a close, she bid him a respectful goodnight, reminding him of their early start the next day. Watching her leave, he realized that having a devoted disciple to lift his spirits was a far better fate than the isolation he had once known. He returns to the academy grounds as the sun sets, the sprawling estate falling into a deceptive evening quiet. Inside the dormitory, the atmosphere is relaxed as students unwind in their shared quarters after the day's duties. They discuss the evening's success, noting that leaving the kitchen responsibilities to the 9th class was a wise move, as the meal was exceptionally well received. However, the mood shifts abruptly when the young dark elf boy senses a chilling pressure in the air, noticing his companions beginning to shake with an uncontrollable, instinctive dread. He alerts the others to a presence lurking just outside the heavy doors, his sharp senses confirming that an intruder has arrived. Suddenly, Master Nicola bursts into the room, his massive frame radiating a lethal intent. He expresses a grim amusement that his spiritual pressure didn't immediately break them, before coldly offering them a final chance to run before he begins his assault. Despite the overwhelming aura of the seasoned warrior, the boy stands his ground, defiantly challenging the man to try and follow through on his threats. Elsewhere in the facility, the swordsman halts on a staircase, his intuition flaring as he detects the sudden eruption of hostile energy. He recalls Jessica's strict orders to guard the library, silently criticizing her for prioritizing a collection of books over the safety of the students, just as a scream pierces the silence of the hallway. Kicking a door open to investigate, he finds himself face-to-face with a bearded stranger. The intruder questions if he is part of the academy staff, only to be met with a sharp retort about his own suspicious and shady appearance. He stands his ground, questioning the intruder's motives and whether the library's archives are the target. The bearded man, however, clarifies that his presence is specifically for the young warrior himself. Pointing a finger with cold certainty, the intruder reveals their true objective, the abduction of the elven princess. He adds that his personal orders are to eliminate any interference, starting with the man before him. His gaze sharpens, a dangerous glint appearing in his eyes as he demands to know why this group has targeted Alice. He continues to press for answers, questioning why a professional would reveal their target so readily. The old man remains stoic, stating he only acts on his superior's commands and has no obligation to explain further. Unfazed, the youth asks if the man truly believes he can defeat him. A confident smirk plays on the intruder's lips as he claims a perfect record in single combat. Matching the arrogance, the young man replies that he, too, has never known the sting of defeat in a one-on-one duel. Suggesting a change of scenery, the bearded man proposes they take their business to the road, as a cramped hallway would make for a dull exchange of blows. He agrees to the terms but adds a mocking condition of his own, promising to refrain from using his legs as a handicap for the older man's age. Accepting the challenge with a grunt of amusement, the veteran warrior agrees to a pure test of strength using only their fists. The young man takes his first step forward, the air thick with anticipation. They lock eyes one final time, confirming the rules of their engagement. A brutal bout of infighting where only punches are permitted. Suddenly, the old man lunges, his fist connecting with the youth's chest in a heavy, bone-jarring strike that echoes through the quiet night. He stares in disbelief, his eyes wide as he realizes his powerful strike had no effect. The young man stands before him, steam rising from his shoulders, completely unmoved by the impact. A confident smirk plays across the youth's lips as he taunts his opponent, daring the veteran to stop holding back and deliver his absolute best shot. With a guttural roar, the older man obliges, driving a devastating punch deep into the youth's midsection. The force of the impact creates a shockwave, forcing a sharp grunt of pain from his target. Yet the young warrior remains upright. Having weathered the storm, he calmly adjusts his stance and cracks his knuckles, his expression hardening as he announces that the time for defense has ended and his counterattack is about to begin. He lunges forward with a sudden burst of speed, throwing a heavy right hook that the veteran barely manages to evade, the wind of the passing fist whistling past his ear. Seizing a momentary opening, the seasoned fighter retaliates with a rapid-fire combination of strikes, catching the youth off guard and forcing him to focus entirely on defense. The two warriors become a blur of motion, their limbs clashing in a frantic exchange of blocks and counters as they test each other's reflexes and resolve in the heat of the restricted duel. He manages to find a gap and throws a powerful straight punch, but the veteran is quick to react, bracing his forearm to absorb the heavy impact. Sensing a shift in momentum, the older man realizes he has successfully broken his opponent's posture, watching with grim satisfaction as the youth staggers backward, momentarily vulnerable. Capitalizing on the opening, he lunges forward to deliver a finishing blow, but the two combatants collide with a sickening thud, their foreheads slamming together in a desperate struggle for dominance. He stares back at the young man, their faces inches apart in the tense silence following their collision. Suddenly, the veteran's strength fails him, and he collapses forward, his body going limp as he slumps against his opponent. Teach taps his temple with a confident smirk, answering the older man's confused query by stating he simply used his head to secure the victory. He elaborates on the deception, explaining that by declaring he wouldn't use his legs, he forced his opponent to focus entirely on his upper body, a calculated misdirection that dictated the entire flow of the fight. Continuing his explanation, he notes his specialty in manipulating opponents, pointing out that the veteran was too preoccupied with punches to consider any other possibility, leaving him vulnerable to the final blow. The watchman lets out a hearty laugh, admitting defeat and expressing genuine wonder at the vastness of the world and the unique fighting styles he has yet to encounter. With the conflict resolved, Teach turns his back and dismisses the man, telling him to leave as the dust of their battle settles. Elsewhere, the atmosphere shifts to the quiet elegance of a well-appointed bedroom, complete with a grand chandelier and polished wooden wardrobes. Alice and Iris sit together on the edge of the bed, reflecting on how long it has been since they last shared a room and reminiscing about their shared childhood. The conversation turns playful as Iris brings up an embarrassing memory of Alice wetting the bed, prompting a light-hearted exchange between the two friends. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched in her lap as a quiet tension filled the room. Alice leaned in, her voice soft as she asked if something was bothering her. Iris looked away, admitting that perhaps there was some truth to that. Observing her distress, Alice moved closer and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, reminding her that they were family and urging her to share whatever was on her mind. Iris hesitated, her gaze downcast as she struggled to find the right words, eventually murmuring that it wasn't quite what Alice thought. The two shared a quiet, intimate moment, their eyes meeting in the dim light of the room. Iris finally offered a small, sincere thanks, acknowledging the bond they shared. However, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered by a sudden, unnatural chill that swept through the chamber. Alice shivered, questioning the abrupt drop in temperature, while Iris let out a sharp grunt of discomfort as the air grew heavy. Sensing a shift in the environment, the young elf clenched her fist, her instincts screaming. She realized with a start that a powerful presence was exuding ki nearby, the pressure of it tangible in the air. She turned to Alice with a look of concern, but the princess remained remarkably composed. Alice simply noted that such displays of power didn't affect her the way they once did, her confidence unshaken. Their attention shifted toward the heavy wooden doors of the room as the threat drew closer. Alice spoke with a calm authority, stating they needed to formulate a plan before their uninvited guests forced their way inside. Rising from the bed, she stretched her arms and surveyed the surroundings with a tactical eye. After considering the layout of the room, she decided they would have to stick to their usual strategy to handle the coming confrontation. She listened as the elf girl whispered a final warning that the intruders had arrived, reaching up to brush a stray lock of hair from her face as her expression hardened into one of focused determination. Suddenly, the door was thrown open with a violent crash, the lock splintering under the force. A voice rang out from the hallway, triumphantly announcing that they had found the princess exactly where they expected. She stands beside her friend, facing the imposing figure of the man who has broken into their sanctuary. He speaks with a chilling casualness about the consequences of being lied to, threatening to return and kill whoever misled him. Confused by his aggression, she demands to know exactly who he is referring to. The intruder clarifies his target, mentioning the female orc reputed to be the Academy's strongest. As the realization that he has already bested her companion sinks in, she looks at the girl with newfound concern, seeing the weight of defeat in her eyes. Her friend is visibly shaken, trembling as she pleads for surrender, insisting that this man is far beyond their capabilities. This display of cowardice is so unlike her usual defiant self that it leaves the princess momentarily stunned and questioning the true power of their opponent. Steeling herself, she asks the man directly what his intentions are. His answer is blunt. He is there to take her hostage. Despite the looming threat, she remains remarkably composed, telling her companion to stay back and simply observe the events about to unfold. He urges her to comply and come quietly, like a good girl who understands her position. She doesn't flinch or show fear, instead challenging him by asking what the consequences of her refusal would be. The man's patience wears thin as he looms over her, declaring that he will take her by force if necessary. He seems convinced that she finally understands the hopelessness of her situation and the futility of any resistance. He continues his taunts, laughing at the idea of her resisting. He reminds her that he defeated the Academy's strongest warrior, so a weakling like her stands no chance at all against his superior strength. While he gloats, she calmly reaches for a small switch on the wall. With a sharp click, she notes the strange coincidence of their situation, her expression shifting from passive to predatory. She reveals a surprising truth. She, too, has defeated the very person he prides himself on besting. The air in the room shifts as she prepares to move, her calm demeanor masking a sudden, explosive intent. Before he can even process her words, she lunges forward with startling speed. Her leg arcs through the air in a powerful high kick aimed directly at his head, leaving the intruder wide-eyed with shock as his overconfidence is shattered in an instant. She swings her leg with blinding speed, the air whistling as it cuts through the space toward her target. Nicola's eyes widen in a split second of realization, his face tensing as he prepares for an impact he didn't anticipate. Instead of the head, her foot connects solidly with his midsection, the force of the blow echoing through the room. The impact sends a spray of saliva from his mouth as he doubles over, the wind completely knocked out of him by the unexpected feint. As he staggers, she maintains her balance, explaining that only a fool would actually strike the head after announcing it so clearly. She stands tall, her expression cold and calculating, while Iris watches from the background, stunned by the tactical display.